What is the thing we don't talk about in your family? My bio dad showed up last summer, 27 years after never having contact with me, and he comes out of nowhere. Turned out, he just wanted me as a bone marrow/kidney donor for his other son. I agreed to be checked if I was a match. Not gonna blame the 10-year-old kid for his father being a competitor for biggest douche, but my family and I don't talk about it, because I went behind my mother's back to talk to him in the first place after he showed up. Story 2. A lot of people in my family are alcoholics. It's okay to acknowledge that they drink a lot, but it's not okay to call them alcoholics. Even when they do things like routinely pass out on their front lawn, getting a huge number of DUIs, drinking so much Labatt that the company sends them a flag and a lawn chair, getting fired from Fabricland for drunkenly screaming at customers, then barfing on a quilt, or getting pulled over on a motorized beer cooler by the RCMP. All those incidents can be discussed so long as no one mentions alcoholism. Story 33. It was Thanksgiving. My parents had recently returned from Hawaii. My dad wanted to show everyone the photos. He connected the digital camera to the giant flat-screen TV and started up a slideshow of my mother, unclothed, in their bedroom. He scrolled through several and then quickly turned it off and said, "Whoops, wrong cartridge." I was 21 and my boyfriend was with me for the holidays for the first time. My mom started crying. My boyfriend went silent. I just said, "Oh my God." Somehow, my 100-year-old grandma missed the whole thing. We never speak of it. If it was brought up, my mother will yell, "We swore to never mention that," and get red-faced. Story 4. The Parrot from Hawaii. When I was in kindergarten, my family took a trip to Honolulu. While there, a man on the street asked if we wanted photos with his parrots. My sisters and I were jazzed up about it, so my parents said okay. The man had each of us holding a parrot, or a parrot sitting on our shoulder as my mom snapped some pics. Then the man asked my dad to kiss the parrot. My dad was not about this. He was not going to kiss the parrot. But to make his family happy and to get away from Parrot Man, he did. And that's when the parrot chomped his lip. Blood and everything. To this day, over 10 years later, mention of the parrot will incite a 20-minute rant from my dad regarding parrot negligence, and then he gets so mad he has to go fix something in the garage. Do not bring up the parrot. Story 5. I was always told by my family that my biological grandfather on mom's side died in a rock climbing accident right before mom was born. I found out last year that what actually happened was, while he was still attending a military college in the South in the 60s, my grandmother discovered that he liked to wear women's clothing after finding a box of dresses in his size in his closet. The next day, she came back to find him hanging from the ceiling, and she and 2 of her brothers had to smuggle his body out of the room and convince a coroner to rule it as an accident. I'm honestly not even sure of who all in the family knows the truth, but anyone who does sure as hell doesn't talk about it. Edit. I really didn't expect this to blow up as much as it did. I want to thank everyone in their comments for their kind words and to clarify a few things. 1. Just for privacy's sake, I'm not going to say what college this took place at. I feel a little guilty, as is putting such a personal family story out on the internet without giving more identifying info on top of it. 2. To clarify, my grandmother found the dresses in his closet on campus, left out of shock/confusion, and then came back to his room on campus to find him dead. It didn't happen in their shared house or at her place. I apologize for the confusing wording. 3. In that time and place, and in the military, as well as my religious conservative family specifically, self-unaliving was beyond stigmatized, and any investigation into why my grandfather ended himself would have more than likely uncovered his secret and tarnished his memory in the community's eyes, hence the cover-up. 4. My mother was the one that told me this story, so I haven't heard it from the 3 people who were actually there, and probably never will. One of her brothers died before I was born, and my grandmother is suffering from a degenerative mental illness that has completely destroyed her memory. Story 6. We have one pretty devastating self-unaliving attempt in our family that no one acknowledges or even talks about. So the story goes, my 2 cousins, who were brother and sister, got caught having sex. Turned out they were in a full-blown sexual relationship for years. Ben was 19 and Anne was 20 when it all came to light. They were both SA'd by a family friend when they were children and bonded. Is that the right term in this situation? Over that. So my auntie was mortified, told them that it wouldn't be tolerated and that she would be sending Ben to live with relatives in Australia. Ben was so devastated by being found out and the thought of being parted from his sister that he ended himself. My aunt discovered him midway through the attempt. She grabbed him by the legs and held him up, screaming for help until a neighbor heard and called an ambulance. Ben didn't die, but suffered a severe brain injury as a result. He's now in his 40s and is basically a vegetable. He cannot speak, he cannot walk, he drools constantly and makes loud, unintelligible noises. Breaks my goddamn heart. No one ever speaks of Anne. She's vanished. Doesn't want to talk to anyone in the family. It's a pretty sad and messed up situation. When it all happened, the story was that Ben broke his neck in an accident. I only found out the full story from my dad last year after 20 plus years. So how does the truth just come out after 20 years? I mean, I feel like if you go through such lengths to keep it a secret initially, you would just hold on to that. So it's a weird story in and of itself, but the fact that the truth came out after 20 years is kind of weird. Even weirder, I should say. Story 7. My sister's eating disorder. She eats a ton and goes on to vomit. She goes jogging for 1 hour or more per day. Every day, no breaks even though her knees hurt like crazy, and refuses to eat any carbs, fruits and vegetables only. I seem to be the only one that realizes the magnitude of this. I seem to be the only one that thinks of this as a sickness, not as a temporal phase. It's like this for 3 years already. No idea when my parents noticed. In the life of a young woman, whenever I say something, I get shushed at, and later have to justify my quote insensitive behavior in front of my parents. So I just kind of gave up on arguing. Not sure what I can do to change things without disrupting the family. Story 8. When I was about 5 years old, my mom, grandma, brother, and I were about an hour from home, and we stopped to get gas. We went inside to pay, but we were 13 cents short. My mom told the clerk, quote, "Be right back. I'll go get it from the car." So we all go back to the car, and my mom hands me 13 cents and asks me to go pay the clerk. I go inside, and by now a line has formed. I waited in line, not realizing that I probably would have been fine to just go up to the front to just hand him the money. When I finally finished, I walk outside and I could see our minivan driving away. My family was nowhere to be found. They'd left without me, in an unfamiliar neighborhood, 50 miles from home. I got scared, but I can remember feeling like, surely this isn't as abnormal as it feels. They'll be right back, right? So I began to cry, and I walked over and sat on a concrete slab next to the gas station. I'm not sure how long it was, but at least several minutes later, I finally saw the van returning. When they pulled up, my mom was bawling and she began hugging and kissing me and apologizing. Apparently what happened was my brother, 7-year-old, closed the heavy sliding door, and my mom, hearing that sound, assumed it was after I'd crawled back in. So she started to drive away. After all, how long could it take me to deliver 13 cents? The story definitely makes my mother look pretty bad. But because I was so young when it happened, and it was so out of character for her, I was never really mad at her. For the next 15 years or so, we'd tell people that story and kind of laugh about it. My mom would laugh too. Turns out, her laughter was forced. It tore her up inside any time we talked about it. She finally confessed to us how it made her feel, and we all just sort of agreed to never bring it up again. We weren't mad at her. We'd totally forgiven her for her mistake, and made sure she knew that. But she was never able to forgive herself. She's still around and is an amazing mother. We just never tell that story anymore. Story 9. My brother who died. We never talk about him. It's so strange. Growing up, I knew I had a brother, and I knew he was hit and killed by a car walking home, but I don't know anything about him aside from that. I've seen his pictures, I know what he looked like. I don't know anything about his personality, his likes or his dislikes, the type of music he listened to. I once found his comics in my mom's closet when I was younger, but that was about it. It's almost like it's just a story and he wasn't a real person. It wasn't until my grandfather died about 11 years ago and my mother and I walked to his grave. She broke down into an inaudible mess. Then it really hit me for the first time ever that he was a real person, as crazy as that sounds. I don't understand that pain of losing a child, but it hurt to see my mom mourn like that, almost as if it had just happened. The only time since then he was ever mentioned was by my dad a few months ago. Out of my mother, father, and sisters, I'm the tallest. My dad told me how the only one of us who was taller than me was Jimmy, and how he always seemed to keep growing, how he probably would have towered over me. I almost cried. I wish I got to know him. Update. As someone had suggested in the comments, I could check for archived information either by visiting a library to look for a news article and or obituary. I tried to search online for these things with no luck. I did, however, find archived yearbooks. I searched a couple before I found the school he went to. The first book was for 86, and on my phone, I couldn't find 87, the year he died. Once I got to a computer, I was able to find it. After the sophomore class page, there was a nice memoriam for him. Also, I had his age wrong, as I realized reading his memoriam. I had taken the year he was born and the year he died and came up with 16, when in fact he died before his birthday that year, making him only 15. It was nice to read kind words about him and his apparent love for music. I've linked it below with his last name blurred and his picture cropped out. The name at the bottom is not his last name. I'm assuming it's the person who wrote it. Since seeing this, I now feel the need to know what happened. Before, I had felt sad about it and decided I'd just never know. After this, it has in a way lit the fire to find out anything and everything I can. I'm nervous to ask family, but I just may. I will be doing what I can to find out anything on my own first. Story 10. My mother's mental and physical abuse of both me and my sister during our childhoods. Can't talk about it with her because the conversation never goes anywhere. Same crap every time I try to bring it up to get the smallest bit of closure. That never happened. Turns to, well, if it happened, it didn't happen like that. To, well, if it happened like that, then you provoked me and it's all your fault. On a certain level, she believes she genuinely was not abusive because what she did to me was much more mild than the even more abusive upbringing she had herself, and she thinks the fact that she did better means she did good. Can't talk about it with my sister because she's much older than I am and got the F out of the house the second she could, not that I blame her, and wrote off the entire family. Not only my mom, but also me and everyone else. And I've never had any relationship with her and have been rebuffed when I've tried to reach out. Can't talk about it with extended family because my mother never did anything in front of them, and I'm a perpetual F-up, so I have zero credibility. Tried talking to an aunt I used to be close to about it once, and she scolded me for, quote, making up stories, and immediately told my mother what I had said. I knew that if she didn't believe me, none of the rest of them would, and never tried again. Story 11. Okay, to break the chain of secret girlfriends and estranged relatives, my family does not talk about cottage cheese. I can tell you want to hear more about this. For that, we must start at the beginning. My father is a lover of all things dairy. He would drink so much milk as a child, his mother would tell him, "You either have to become a dairy farmer or marry a farmer's daughter." And dear Dad did just that when he and my mom tied the knot. Dad also loves cheese. Solid cheese, soft cheese, and cottage cheese. Dad is, however, very squeamish. He cannot stand the sight or thought of blood, body fluids, or cheese curds. This makes enjoying his cottage cheese, by the court, difficult. No one is allowed to talk about cheese, curds, whey, or how it's all made when he's enjoying his snack. If you make the mistake of mentioning any of these things, Dad ends the conversations by throwing his hands in the air and yelling, "We don't talk about that!" Story 12. That my parents died from AIDS in the early 90s when I was 2. Growing up, I never knew how my mother died. I was told my father just disappeared. I remember throwing a tantrum in middle school for wanting to know what really happened to my parents. My aunt finally told me the truth. Well, more yelled at me about it. I remember crying alone in my room for hours. I'm pretty sure their death was the starting point for how strange my family is. Anyhow, my family hasn't mentioned it since then, and I'm now 27. As far as I know, we've never said the words HIV or AIDS aloud in my family. If it must be talked about, it's that disease or something similar. My friends constantly wonder why I never mention my parents, and I still have hang-ups telling people why/how they passed away. It makes me feel so conflicted inside because I know I should have nothing to feel ashamed of, but my family and society makes me feel my parents' death should be swept under the rug. Edit. I just want to make it clear, we do talk about my mother. She isn't forgotten. Just her death and the exact cause is something that's avoided at all costs. Story 13. When I was growing up, I always heard stories about my dad as a kid hanging out in his mom's tavern. The first time we visited his hometown, he showed us his house, which is on a crossroads and split level. Front door goes to the top floor. Basement, or lower floor, opens out the back, which has a small road/parking area, and that's where the tavern was. It wasn't until many years later that it dawned on me that my dad grew up during Prohibition. Grandma was a bootlegger. It gets better. His hometown is on a road that was considered a bootlegger's highway from Canada. He went through jump school in the same class as Henry Hill, whose life Goodfellas was based on. One night in my teens, a friend of his, who I'd never heard of, knocked on the door at 10 p.m. He and his two buddies, all Italian, wanted a place to sleep for the night. They were gone in the morning. His pension and the work he did after he retired couldn't possibly explain our lifestyle. Mom has forbidden me from digging into it any further. Story 14. The fact that my cousin got kidnapped when he was a baby. Long story short, two young teenagers got knocked up, got married, aunt wanted a divorce, but husband was abusive and manipulative, and she fled out of state back to us, her family. He followed her to try to talk it out. She let him inside to talk. He took my baby cousin, who was sleeping in her arms, and fled out of state. Then he took her to court for abandoning her child and refused to let her see him. 20 years later, my cousin seeks us out and we all reconnect. Thanksgiving dinners are great, but we don't talk about that whole ordeal. I don't understand. I guess the fact that they're young kind of explains it, but why do parents in separation just have this power struggle that it seems like a competition? It seems like they're more concerned with winning than the well-being of their child. That just sucks. Hate it for the kid, but glad that ultimately they were able to grow up and reconnect. Story 15. My mom's cousin. You'd think it was because my family is from the middle of the mountains in the south, and Hillary is a transgender woman. It's not. Nobody cares about that. They care about the fact she's a compulsive liar and drama queen who makes everyone miserable. That she spread rumors about my mom, and no ma'am, that crap don't fly. I remember being really little and my mom saw her coming down the driveway, and we all hit the deck to pretend we weren't home. Nowadays, we just do not mention her existence. She's like the well-dressed, sassy Voldemort to my family, only significantly less dangerous and far more annoying. Story 16. My grandparents try to look like a perfect picture. Reality is, my mom's never met her real dad. My stepfather, who we have never acknowledged aloud as not her father, was a crap drunk who's been on pain pills since he quit drinking. Pain pills my grandmother steals and eats. My uncle married a girl after getting her preggers at 15. Turned out her sister was really her mother in a religious scandal. Other uncle has been on a gambling binge for 30 years. My mom died after getting addicted to the same opiates the family loves and having an aneurysm. I once caught my grandfather self-pleasuring to Baywatch. All those things. Never an effing word. Edit. Clearing the air here. I'm a female from a family of upper middle class. One side Native American mostly, and one side Jewish. My family keeps a great image, have held great jobs/careers, and do not talk about their problems in the open. So no, it's not really as big of a mess as some assume. More like a rabid pack of dogs behind closed doors and closed curtains. My aunt discovered her sister was actually her mother when some genetic testing was happening for separate issues. She grew up thinking her grandmother was her mother, and her mother was her sister. Jehovah's Witnesses. I have no ability to respond to all these questions. I'm kind of a hermit, and have never had so much response. Thank you for peeping my skeletons. Story 18. Last Christmas, my wife and I were having a breakfast at a cafe on Christmas Eve before doing some last-minute shopping. At one point, she got up and went to the bathroom, during which the old man at the neighboring table asked for his bill and was told it was already taken care of. When my wife returned, I related the story, and I said I wish I had thought of something like that. She gave me an odd look, and then I realized she'd actually got up to pay for the breakfast of anyone dining alone, 2 or 3 people. Told me it had been a tradition with friends from before I met her, 'cause anyone alone on Christmas deserved a little happiness. Just knowing her sometimes makes me feel like a better person, and I love her like crazy for doing things like this. I think the moral is, sometimes it's better not to talk about things, but just do them. Story 19. My uncle and his friend, who's been around since I have memory, almost 30 years. They've never had a female companion. They live together. Damn, they even owned a gay bar at some point. Very Catholic family, so that's probably why they never came out. I thought it was something they kept from us, the kids, all these years, until I had the courage to ask my dad, and he said that's never been discussed, that he's never even asked my mom about it. They seem happy and travel all the time, so that's awesome. I just wish they could be who they are around their loved ones. Story 20. Around my grandfather, his brother Peter. Peter was a real piece of work, likely bipolar and psychotic, never diagnosed back in the day. He made my great-grandparents afraid, but calmed down as he aged. Thankfully, as it let my grandfather leave home as he didn't need to protect them. My great-grandmother died early, but my great-grandmother died just after my little bro was born. A few years before she died, she was offered by Peter and his wife to look after her. There was a small cottage on the property, and the deal was if she let them take over the house, she would have the cottage and they would make sure she was all right, clean, etc. My other great-grandparents actually did this as well with my grandmother's sister, and it was the perfect arrangement. But instead, Peter used it to get the house signed over. They then packed up a bag with their clothes and dropped her at a state nursing home. She died there. My grandfather tried to organize to move her, but by the time he found out, they were in Britain, we were in Canada, she was too feeble to be safe to move. She would die there. Almost all of her stuff had been taken by Peter. Bank account drained, belongings taken, etc. Only a few pieces of her jewelry survived. When she had realized what was going to happen, but after signing, she collected what she could and secretly mailed them across the ocean to our family. It's for that reason, at least, that our family has the garnet watch that the man passed down, the family rings, and a few other pieces. All the rest would be taken by Peter. So we don't talk about Peter, and I think if my grandfather ever saw him again, he would kill him, saying F the consequences. Peter didn't show up to the funeral for a reason. Story 21. My dad never talks about his sister. She stole thousands from her father, fled to New Mexico, and is now hosting my great-uncle and waiting for him to die so she can claim his belongings. I don't know if he's actually going to will anything to her, but she seems certain. I haven't seen my aunt in over a decade, but she's a real piece of work. My mom complains about it a lot, but the rest of her family doesn't really like to admit that they don't talk to her much. There was some big drama years ago where they fought over mom's parenting. This was largely because of me, and since then, my mom's sister and parents rarely speak to her. My family also refuses to talk about or acknowledge my parents' disciplinary methods, which involved taking one of us unruly children, throwing us in a tub of cold water, and dunking our heads under it repeatedly while yelling at us. They did this for years anytime one of us got, quote, seriously out of line. They also once force-fed my sister mustard because she hates it. Maybe you can see why my relatives disagreed with mom's parenting. Story 22. My dad's friend committed self-unaliving by shooting himself in the head in front of my dad and some other friends when he was 15 years old. I first heard this story from my mom when I was 18, which explains some of my dad's behavior towards toy guns when I was a kid. I never brought it up to him, hoping that one day he would open up to me about it, and he eventually did. But since then, we haven't talked about it. I'm amazed how my dad turned out to be such a great man, having to experience something awful like that at such a young age. But according to him, it's something that never left him either. He still has nightmares about it and gets really uneasy in movies and TV shows when they show someone getting shot in the head. Story 23. When I was 16, a friend of mine was selling his motorcycle and I was interested in purchasing it. I needed some reliable transportation to get to school and work, and my friend was letting the motorbike go for cheap. My father went mental when I told him my plan, like way more than a necessary reaction. It shocked me, and I dropped my plans for the purchase. I had no idea why the vehement resistance. A few years later, he told me while we were fishing, when he was 16, he had just bought a new motorcycle and his friend asked if he could ride it. My dad said sure, and the friend asked my dad's GF if she wanted to ride too. This was in the 60s, so they weren't wearing helmets or leathers or anything safety related. They drove around the block, but were going too fast. Hit a patch of gravel and crashed the bike. My dad's friend and my dad's GF were both killed instantly. I finally understood why he had flipped out so badly. Yeah, survivor's guilt is a real thing. That has to suck, and there's no escaping it. Like, anytime you're presented with a situation of like seeing a motorcycle or talking about it, I'm sure that those feelings always bubble back to the surface. That sucks. Story 24. My mother-in-law is enormously, grotesquely fat. 300 plus pounds, and is a burden to her children. She is literally the elephant in the room. For someone not yet senile, she's the most mentally and physically helpless person I've ever met. Fortunately, she can afford a first-class assisted living place, but one son has to manage all her finances and do her taxes, while her other son handles all her medical issues, prescriptions, and doctor visits. Neither son is compensated. She could easily afford a taxi, but she doesn't want to pay for one, always expecting us to endure the hours-long commutes on congested freeways to visit. Meeting Mom for lunch takes most of a day. Then, when we come, she requests we do her sundry shopping, heavy diet on soda, mini brandies, and champagne 4-packs. She uses a cane but declines to walk by herself, insisting on holding onto your arm as you walk very, very, very slowly, carrying her ridiculously heavy handbag in your other hand. She declines to use a walker or wheelchair because she's too vain, which she openly admits. It is clear that being personally escorted and catered to suits her more. It may sound like I don't like her. Not true. MIL is a nice person and a kindly soul who raised a wonderful son. As a person, I like her a lot, but I now have stage 4 cancer, ovarian, which is terminal. Thankfully, I'm still mobile, not in pain yet, and can drive. But Mom's helplessness, using my husband to be her unpaid accountant, bookkeeper, and personal delivery service, is starting to get to me. Story 25. One of my cousins is a convicted predator. My other cousin, his older brother, is in jail for domestic violence, and he and his wife had their child taken away. My other cousin, their sister, has 3 children. One is with her, one is with her first husband, and one is still a little bun in the oven. Their other sister is about to have a baby too. The 2 sisters got married a month apart this summer. They're all between 18 and 25. We gossip about all that sometimes, but we don't ever mention the time their mom tried to get my dad to adopt them because she just didn't want to deal with him anymore. Story 26. Mental health. My dad suffers severely from depression and often will try to self-medicate with alcohol. He's not an alcoholic by any means, but he's drinking for the wrong reasons, and it isn't very healthy. I struggle with depression, wanting to self-unalive, loneliness, anxiety disorder. My brain is effed up. But I didn't know about my dad's issues until I was an adult. I had been struggling with these feelings since I was a kid and didn't want to say anything because I felt it would make me seem weak or messed up. I remember being around 13, and I posted a Facebook status saying, "Rachel Leanne 17 is mad at me, world, but doesn't know why. Sad face." When people started getting in touch with my mom asking if something happened to me, she got angry and told me to take down the status. That was it. No conversation about how I was feeling, no info about why I was feeling that way. It really messed me up, so I want to make sure that in my future home, mental health is acknowledged and taken care of, just like physical health. Story 27. One of my parents mistreated me to a pretty severe degree. The other worked like 80-hour weeks and had no clue. The part that's effed is my older sibling wasn't abused and was occasionally involved. They broke down one time when I brought up an occasion I was held against a wall by my parent so my sibling could kick me in the testes as a punishment. I've tried to stay as anonymous as possible, but this stuff happened for a decent portion of my childhood until I could stand up for myself. Literally spoke with my sibling once about it. They admitted it happened, got emotional, got blackout drunk, and IDK if they remember. My family now gets along great, other than some issues with my sibling. It would ruin my other parents' life and seriously threaten their unstable health if they found out. Seeing as I've been able to move on and lead a pretty healthy life, I'm fine with never bringing it up again. Story 28. My mom has 6 brothers, 6 uncles. However, there's a 7th uncle, and he's older than my mom. He exists because of the way our language works. Okay, so in my language, the first sibling, or the oldest, is called by the number 2, and then 3, and so on. My uncles call my mom by the number 3, so there has to be a number 2, right? Exactly. My cousins have talked about him, but when we look in the photos, nothing. No signs of him. I asked my mom about it before, and she nonchalantly says that she doesn't know what I'm talking about. One of my uncles has stated that they wanted to use Google to find him. He doesn't know how the internet works, and all of his siblings shrugged it off like it was nothing. So yeah, I have a 7th uncle, yet I don't know who he is or what he even looks like, and my family refuses to acknowledge him. I would like to clarify that the uncle who'd asked to search him on Google did in fact know him personally. So no, it wasn't stillbirth. Just found out from the Google uncle. He's either lost or dead. How, you might ask? Some time ago, he took a boat to go to America illegally. No, I'm not kidding. This is straight out of the plot of The Foreigner starring Jackie Chan. His boat either sank or sent him somewhere not America, and hence why he's missing. As for photos, the Google uncle said that my mom and her mom kept it in a separate book, apart from everyone else's. Weird how they share this information now. What still bothers me is this. When someone dies, our culture creates a small shrine for them in our house. There's no shrine of his in ours, or in any of my family's houses. Story 29. Practically everything I would say at this point. I come from an incredibly orthodox Muslim family, and repression and denial are the roots of my family history. SA, sexual orientation, affection, doubts of any kind, it is all just ignored and taken as something to shove under the rug. Other than that, I think one important thing we don't talk about is how my parents are separated but not divorced. My mother, however, stays with her in-laws and extended family, while my father moved to a different city and has an altogether different life there, including being in a committed relationship with another woman, while my mother continues to fulfill the good daughter-in-law role. Story 30. My uncle died of autoerotic asphyxiation when he was in high school. As a kid, we were just told he died and that we'd talk about it when we were older. When I was a preteen, I selfishly and stupidly pushed my mom on it and got "he died from hanging" out of her, but she left it open, saying that they didn't know exactly what had happened, so for a few years my teenage imagination kept open the possibility that he'd actually been murdered by hanging. Then one day I happened upon Oprah doing an episode about AES, and it really stuck in my mind for some reason. Probably because I was at that age of just starting to self-pleasure and didn't want to die. The next time I was at my mom's, my dad raised me, she mentioned that Oprah had done an episode about the way that my uncle had died, and she had taped it, and it would be easier for me to watch it to understand what happened. It clicked immediately what she was talking about, and I never watched it, and I'm pretty sure it's never been mentioned again in the last 30 years. Story 31. My dad bought a Christmas ornament in the 70s. A little man made out of black pipe cleaner, with a bit of decoration. It was maybe 1/4 of an inch long, and you could barely see it on the tree. It wasn't even supposed to be an ornament, really. Just a tiny pipe cleaner man, whose arms could be wrapped around a thin branch. My dad called this ornament Zulu Man, and he effing loved that thing. My whole childhood, every year when we unpacked the box of ornaments, my dad would joke/not a joke grow more and more agitated, frequently declaring, "If Zulu Man isn't there, Christmas is canceled," until Zulu Man was finally found. Throughout the season, my sister and I would periodically inspect the tree and feign horror, asking Dad if he'd moved Zulu Man for some reason. And we'd hyperventilate with laughter while he ran to the tree to double check it was only a prank. Christmas was canceled and subsequently reinstated a lot in our house. One year, when I came back from college, we unpacked the ornament box, and Zulu Man wasn't in his usual twist of tissue paper. My dad must have canceled Christmas 3 dozen times while we unpacked the box, and my sister and I were in fits of giggles, until we reached the bottom of the box and he was still nowhere to be found. None of us said anything about it, even then, but the look on my dad's face broke my effing heart. I'll remember it as long as I remember my own name. I brought up Zulu Man once, some 10 years later, and my mom and sister immediately shushed me. That's the last time I've said his name, but I still nurse this wild hope. Every time I open an old box of books from my childhood home or dig up a purse from college, that I'll find Zulu Man clinging inside, staring up at me, waiting to hug his next tree branch and heal my father's heart. Story 32. Sister-in-law has one of my parents' credit cards. She used to use it to do the grocery shopping for parents. Well, now she uses it to buy groceries for her family. She and my brother are financially well off. My brother isn't aware that she's spending $400 to $500 per month on the card. I told my parents they should confront her and tell my brother, but they're too scared that she will get mad and refuse to bring their grandchildren around. I offered to cancel their card or confront for them, but they told me to stay out of it. I try to honor their wishes, but it sure is awkward when I'm around my brother. Story 33. My entire childhood. Apparently, I didn't exist until I was 11 and was handed my newborn brother and told he was my responsibility. Before that, who knows? Most embarrassing moments included the X-ray tech asking, "Geez, how many times did you break that wrist?" I didn't know until then, 43 years old, that I had broken any bones. And then the time the doctor refused to believe I'd never had sex because my hymen was, quote, clearly damaged. Up until then, I'd only suspected I'd been SA'd. Story 34. My whole family was raised in the Episcopal Church, so naturally my parents took me and my little brother there and made us be acolytes, the kids who hold the candles and gospel. In high school, the Special Victims Unit came knocking on my door and sat me and my parents down and showed us evidence that I suffered years of SA at the hand of a male church employee. My mother refused to let me testify and told me over and over again that, quote, "It's just a woman's place." I wanted to confront the man so much and even received letters from other victims, girls I used to go to church with, begging me to help them put away the man. No one in my family mentioned it ever again. Never even took me to therapy. Just last week at my college graduation, me and my brother got drunk and he confessed he somehow found out and him and his friends curb stomped the man. I'm not a vengeful person, but I finally had a huge weight lifted. Story 35. My brother's few years of living the gay life. My entire family is way open-minded and pretty much live by the motto, not my life, don't give a F, about a person's personal choices. You get your happiness and get it good and often, you know? My parents would have my brother and his partner over very often for dinners and events, and even my grandmother, who was born at the beginning of the century, adored the boyfriend. He was a good guy in every aspect and pretty much seemed like one of our clan while he was around. But then my brother just changed, again. He broke up with the man and went straight. Not bi or even flirtatious about other men, just flat out straight. From Pride Parade to measuring ruler straight. He's gone through 2 wives and has 5 children and 1 grandchild. It's like those 4 years if he and that guy never happened. No mention of the guy's name, no family photos or videos with them together, and for the life of me, I'm fairly sure his children don't have a clue about it. We aren't embarrassed by it. We weren't then and we aren't now. He isn't the type of brother who lives in shame either, so what the F gives? At times I catch myself blinking, wondering if I had imagined it all. Maybe once in a blue moon my mother and I, and only us, will ever speak of it and we shake our heads and chuckle. That did happen, right, Mom? I think it did. I seem to have gifts from him still. And then that conversation is done and isn't brought up again for a couple years. What makes it even more confusing is that our most loved cousin is gay. A recently passed uncle was down low bi, and my niece is unabashedly lesbian who seems dead set on scoring an entire Pokedex of girlfriends. And the family is cool and dandy about it, but apparently my brother was never gay or something. Hell, help me understand that crap? Story 36. I was at the dinner table with my husband, his parents, his cousin, and his aunt. They'd been discussing hidden messages in Disney movies when his aunt leans forward and, in total horror, exclaims, "Did you hear what they're doing with Frozen? They're going to give Elsa a girlfriend. What the hell? What if parents don't want their children exposed to that?" Now, I look around the table looking for anyone else to laugh with me at what is obviously satire, except no one's laughing, and his aunt continued on her rant. I realize she's dead serious. Here's the thing, though. That cousin sitting at the table with us, she's that aunt's daughter, conceived in a lesbian relationship that spanned a decade. And apparently, the fact that she was with a woman longer than she's ever been with a man is what we don't talk about. Story 37. So many things. 1. My mom has had bad body dysmorphic disorder. My brother has now developed it too. We're all adults, and he didn't know the signs until he heavily got into competitive running. My mom also had anorexia as a teen. 2. Mom's been married 4 times, but only says 3. She thinks no one remembers her first husband. Married right out of high school, so her kids weren't even born yet. But our aunt talked to us about it, thinking we all knew about him. 3. My brother's bio dad is different from the man he was told was his father. He found out when he was close to 30. 4. Both of my parents had affairs with each other before divorcing their spouses to marry one another. 5. My sister was SA'd by a family friend when she was 9 or 10, and my parents' response to her telling them was to send her to a fat camp. 6. 2 of my dad's brothers lived across the street from each other and went almost a decade without speaking due to some unknown grudge. 7. My family's farm ground ran alongside the land of my crazy bachelor cousins. They hated the family and would shoot at anyone from the family that wandered onto their land. Nothing was marked. There were no fences, so this was easy to do. Personally happened to me when I was 12 and out snowmobiling. Scared the crap out of me. 8. My brother got a girl pregnant when they were both 13. My extremely Catholic, pro-life, let's be real, anti-choice mother paid for the girl to get an abortion. Shocking, right? I could go on and on. Seriously, both sides of my family are crazier than a moth careening into a streetlight. It sounds like your family is just a bunch of sex addicts and need to keep it in the pants for a little bit. My God, what a mess. Story 38. Was always told that my aunt was never married, but I learned recently that she was married to a man and actually had a son. Her husband was insanely conservative, and when their son came out as gay, he completely shunned him, treated him like total crap, told him how wrong and messed up he was, kicked him out multiple times, etc. One night, my aunt and her husband came home to their son standing in the living room with his father's shotgun to his own head. He said something along the lines of, "This is your fault, Dad," and shot himself in front of them. My aunt left the next day and never said another word to him, her husband, or saw him again. I remember once at a family reunion, my little cousin asked why my aunt didn't have kids, since all of my mom's other siblings did. She didn't say anything and left the room, and the whole place fell silent. I never understood why until my mom told me the story recently. I looked up the obituary of his death, and it said that his death was an accident or something. Story 39. My uncle by marriage was essaying my 8-year-old cousin. The investigation into that revealed that a few decades ago, he was essaying his stepdaughter from age 12. No one believed her when she tried talking to someone. He died in prison of a heart attack. Still wish he was killed by other inmates. He watched after us a lot as babies and kids. Was I essayed? Is that maybe what caused my severe depressive disorder and a youth of social anxiety? I don't know and never will. No one talks about him, ever. Even when he died, my mom briefly mentioned it like it was some nonchalant small talk. Story 40. Uncle 1 nailed his secretary at work, and then was a pallbearer at her funeral. Uncle 2 went to Pound Town with his next-door neighbor while his wife was pregnant. Uncle 3, not blood-related but through marriage, sued my grandfather because my grandfather wouldn't give the uncle my grandfather's business, which he built from nothing. Aunt 3, married Uncle 3, bailed her daughter out by buying her daughter's home, would only do it for well under market value, then sold the home to the current occupants. My extended family are pieces of work. How we have family reunions that are peaceful, I'll never know. Story 41. My family thinks addicts are a waste and should be all shot, etc. You know the type. Meanwhile, my parents are 300 plus pounds, eat opiates like they're candy. Don't worry, there are many doctors prescribe them, so they don't count. My brother is 40, still lives with my parents, an alcoholic, and will do anything that gets him high, including propane if nothing else is around. He has a 15-year-old son that does whatever he wants, and will buy him weed and booze as long as he pays in shares. All this is completely ignored. I stopped talking to them after I found out they called CPS about my daughter because I have a medicinal marijuana card. My daughter is turning 20, and they called last year. Story 42. My dad's drinking problem. He's the definition of a functional alcoholic. Very successful businessman. Never interfered with his work. Always provided very well for our family. But like clockwork, at 4:30 p.m., down the hatch. He's not violent or anything, but just insufferable, incoherent, obnoxious, embarrassing, depending on the setting. It's been getting worse as he entered semi-retirement, just because he has so much more free time and I don't think he knows what to do with it. I worry because he's nearing 70 and already well past the age at which his dad passed away. I live far away and we have a very old school relationship. I love him and he loves me, but we don't state it. But just this week, I finally got the courage to write him a letter I've been wanting to write for 5 years. Could never bring myself to, just laid it all out there. That I'm worried about him, that we miss the old him, that time is of the essence. He can't put off cleaning up because before long, it will be too late. Story 43. My older sister dropping out of school to have a baby. You can't bring it up without suddenly amending, but she's so smart and such a hard worker now. She still treated the other family members like crap and supported her husband's KKK activities. My other older sister being a hardcore drug addict and thug. You can't bring it up without suddenly amending, well, she turned herself around and loves God now. She's still a sociopath who treats everyone like resources to be consumed and thrown away. My mother's decades of alcohol and child abuse. If you bring it up, she'll get drunk and abuse you too. She'll go through the whole narcissist prayer and denying any of that happened before turning it around and making it everyone else's fault but her own. But it's okay to talk about how I'm a failure and how meaningless my fake illness is, or to point at me and make fun of me. Story 44. This is a throwaway. When I was 6, I was essayed by my female cousin. I don't think it was bad at the time. Cousin said she was showing me what boys like. I told my mother, who confronted cousin's mom, who proceeded to call kindergartner me a liar and that she never wanted to see me again. Fast forward 6 years. I was 12. Another cousin, different one, except it was a male, essayed me and said he was going to teach me to dance, and said I was his girl. At 12, I was excited to be someone's girl. I didn't tell anybody this time. I didn't want the fallout. I wrote it in my diary instead, where my mom subsequently found out months later by reading it. She didn't tell anybody, but when I tried to talk to her about it as I got older, she told me I was overreacting, and she had gone through the same thing with my male cousin's grandfather, to quit whining about it and move on, to get over it. I still haven't gotten over it, and although I've been to therapy, I'm afraid to tell them about this due to me not wanting anyone to get in trouble. Now I hate sex, and I feel like I'm not worth any attention from my spouse sexually, that I don't deserve to talk about it because it could have been worse. Story 45. My dad doesn't talk to his family. His mom was married a few times, and he has a bunch of half-siblings and one full brother. Full brother is the product of my grandpa essaying my grandmother when my dad was 10, and they had been divorced for years, and my dad kind of raised him after he was born. That same full brother disappeared for a decade, and my dad found out he had been in prison in another state. Got out, got in touch with my dad on the phone, told him what was up, and my dad told my mom. That was the last communication between them. That was in 1996. I found this out when I got my mom drunk a few years ago before my first kid was born, under the premise of needing to know family health history. None of it has ever been spoken of again. Story 46. There's a wealthy family that lived in the same town I grew up in, and they had a son my age and a daughter my sister's age. Not to say my family isn't wealthy, but these people acted wealthy, if that makes sense. The son played basketball with me and the daughter danced with my sister. Our basketball coach during high school was a complete dick and chose his favorite players based on contributions/donations to our team, i.e. being in the parents' club, giving money for team uniforms and whatnot. This son was obviously a favorite based on his family, and unfortunately I was not a favorite of the coach despite my skill and love for the game. One day during the week, we lost a game that we should have won, and the coach scheduled a practice on a Sunday morning. As a religious family, we were not happy, so I tried to post on Facebook about all the players boycotting the coach and having no one show up to practice. I thought most would be on board, and one player was even the son of a priest. However, the son of the other family, being a favorite, did not like this, and he basically tattled on me. The next day, my father came into my sister's dance class, where my mom was waiting for her to be finished, and screamed at my mother in front of everyone. He basically said that she doesn't know how to control her children and is unfit to be a mother. Naturally, she cried, and another dance mom called my father to come and settle this one-sided argument. My father is a big dude, 6'4" and 300 pounds, so of course when he came, obviously not very happy, the father of the family got all scared and immediately apologized to both of my parents and everyone else in the studio. Since that time, there's been a fairly large feud between us, and they always try to compare their children to my sister and me. However, now my sister is a professional dancer, and I'm finishing my degree in astrophysics fairly soon, while the son is a med school dropout, and the daughter low-key became a whore. To this day, that family is never mentioned in my household. Story 47. Oh, let's see. My family's the we don't talk about anything negative type, so this should be a fun list. My sister's self-unaliving attempt in 2007. She's okay now and doing great for herself. One uncle disappeared from the family in 2008, after he was caught with CP and arrested. I got in trouble for mentioning in a conversation to my cousin that our grandmother was having a hip surgery. I thought it was common knowledge, but my uncle didn't tell his kids. These cousins would have been 19 to 21 at the time. About it, apparently. Go figure, these same cousins found out about our predator uncle in the newspaper. My other sister getting violently drunk at prom. An ongoing feud between my mother and her siblings and her cousin about end-of-life care for my grandmother. She has since passed, but it's not a full-out brawl, just a few snide, passive-aggressive comments made. Any mental breakdowns, and there have been several big ones in this family. My father's drinking and violent rampages. And maybe the disappearance of Mark, my aunt's adopted nephew. He's alive and doing okay. He's added me on Facebook. But looking back, my family treated him horribly and never made him feel welcome into the family, always treating him like an outsider. I don't blame him at all for staying away. Story 50. My sister and her husband organized this extravagant 150-ish guest wedding they were planning to pay for on their own because together they made over 6 figures a year. He was in home construction and she was a nurse manager at a huge hospital. They had a great relationship until they got engaged. at which point everything went to crap for a while. First oops. They got pregnant after putting all the deposits down 6 months before the wedding. Apparently, my brother-in-law is one of those, but babe, I can't stand the way condoms feel, guys. Second oops. As a result of the recession/housing bubble bursting, he lost his job 4 months before the wedding. Third oops. His parents, worth 7 figures apparently, said they would not pay for the wedding because his mom believes in tradition and that the bride's family should pay. This point is in question. Later on, it was implied that he may have been too scared to ask his parents for help. Fourth oops. The bride's family happens to just be a broke widow living paycheck to paycheck in a house she's upside down in. Fifth oops. On multiple occasions, the bride tearfully insists that everything else about her wedding had to be perfect because her dad wasn't alive to walk her down the aisle, and she had been dreaming about the perfect wedding ever since she had cancer when she was a little kid. Apparently, she was dreaming of an open bar when she was laying in the hospital at 4 years old. Long story short, after a lot of emotional manipulation, my sister and her husband convinced my mom to take out a third mortgage and some credit cards to help them pay for the wedding. She also cashed in a life insurance policy or two. She spent a total of something close to $15,000. They promised her they would pay her back as soon as he was working again and they were back on their feet. Within a year of the wedding, Mom lost her house. A year after that, she filed for bankruptcy. As of today, they've only paid her back $1,000 of the $15,000, which barely counts as paying her back, because after they got married, they continued to ask for financial help that totaled well over $1,000, including tires for a car, vehicle registrations, and the more expensive items needed for the baby, i.e. crib, stroller, etc. Their 10th anniversary is in 6 months. At their current rate of pay, they'll have Mom paid back when she turns 160. Story 51. On my dad's side, my Aunt Stephanie had an affair with my Uncle Joe, whose then wife was dying of cancer. They weren't blood related, don't worry, it's a complicated story. After she died, Joe's son Aaron disowned the family for a few years. He's now a single dad of 26 with 2 sons since his ex left him for another man. Just last year, he started coming back to family holidays. I'm only 17, so my dad just told me about this since I guess I'm old enough. I've gotten to know him a little, and he's such a sweet man. I don't know how he lived through this crap. If you want to picture him, just imagine John Krasinski with a beard and a higher voice. He looks exactly like him. It's freaky. I was fangirling for like 20 minutes to my cousins before I found out it wasn't him. Summary. Just to clear things up, my uncle's son, Aaron, was the guy who I got to know that turned out to be an amazing person. There was some confusion. Story 52. I really don't like my kid. I fell for the usual women like babies stuff. I work with kids and enjoy seeing them learn and grow. But the 24/7 aspects of parenthood wear me down, and I've never felt it to be rewarding. At all. Ever. Every minute with my own child is either dull or grating, and the more personality he develops, the less I like him. I'd never hurt him. I provide for him. My partner took over as the primary caregiver so that I can save energy and do my best to be affectionate and friendly when I'm with the kid. But heaven help me if I so much as suggest being tired of parenting, much less acknowledge I generally hate my kid and wish myself dead if I spend too long with him. Even my partner can't touch on it. Doctors blame my depression because my meds apparently fix all my symptoms except for the not liking your kid bit. Friends still believe I'll snap out of it and want more kids again in a few years. Anyone else sees me as either still depressed or a monster. The idea that you can misjudge how much you enjoy the company of children, that there are people in this world who regret having kids, that we don't all have a magical bond with our flesh and blood, is apparently beyond even those I thought were close to me. It's just total taboo now. Story 53. Lots of things, apparently. My dad has a very loose grasp on honesty. So Sunday I found out my dad has cancer. Getting something out of his dresser, saw a treatment calendar and medication. Knowing the answer I'll probably get, I confront him. Do you have cancer? No. Why would you think that? Because I saw the treatment schedule from MD Anderson. Yeah, I have leukemia. Other than having cancer, it was a hilarious denial that was very expected. Some shock and anger and sadness, and still some fear, but his response couldn't be more my dad. I'm still laughing, and my wife had the same response. Story 54. Apparently effing everything, because everyone in my family is some mix of really autistic or emotionally incapable. I'm not even just being an a-hole. Literal Asperger's couple with bad parenting. TLDR. It's mostly cheating, gambling, and mental illness. One uncle cheated on my aunt, constantly. New girl every few years for 40 years. My aunt died of cancer, and he just stopped hiding it. We were expected to say nothing about these bimbos at family gatherings to avoid drama, who were invariably 20-something gold-digging stereotypes. We stopped going to family gatherings on that side of the family once Nana, grandma on that side, died. My uncle on the other side of the family is thousands upon thousands of pounds in debt to my grandparents because he spent his entire youth drinking and gambling it away, and they kept bailing him out. He's now an accountant making megabucks because life isn't fair, and is refusing to fork out money to look after the grandparents now they're in their 80s, so it's all falling on my parents. It's not the only reason he's a massive idiot, but we're not allowed to call him out on it because the grandparents are terrified he will deny them access to their granddaughter, my cousin, and between Parkinson's and liver failure, they're not sure how long either of them have left. I'd imagine it's going to come to a head once they're gone, and I'm kind of waiting for it with glee, as much as I love my grandparents. Oh, and my whole family is well aware of my serious mental illnesses. Mom sent me to therapy in the first place, but they absolutely hate it when I bring it up in front of them because they don't like feeling like they were a component because of it. Oh, and my dad looks at me like I'm garbage because he had a doctorate in some high-paying STEM Gen Xer job at my age, and I'm just starting my master's. And I can't call them out because I'm a penniless student who still needs their financial support. So that was a fun vent. Story 55. I posted about this on another thread recently. When I was 4 and my mother was 19, my grandmother requested that my grandfather punish her by essaying her. He did. He essayed my mother in front of me while my grandmother held me back in front of them. I remember her screaming and crying for him to stop, and his grunting and my screaming. I screamed, "Mommy!" over and over, but he won't stop and my grandmother wouldn't let me go. My mother from that point on left me with anyone that would take care of me, mostly my great-grandma that died when I was still a kid. When she couldn't ditch me anymore, she began to abuse me in ways that made what her parents did look like Sunday dinner. Just me, not my siblings. No one would talk about it, and I got my ass beat for bringing it up multiple times. One time my mom let it slip that my birth father, who abandoned me as a baby, used to claim that there was a DNA test performed by the courts and it proved I wasn't his. He was able to sign his rights away because of it. Thing is, I always believed that was just a lie my father told. Now I realize he may actually not be my biological father. Recently I did the math and realized that it's probably an untold truth that I'm the product of my grandfather essaying his 15-year-old daughter. I can't know for sure, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to know for sure, but it adds up a lot neater than the story my abusers told. I cut them off years ago. My grandfather served 4 years on a 15-year prison sentence in another state. I don't know the details past that. The whole family is dead to me. Yeah, I think NC no contact's the only way to go. If this is how everyone else in your family is behaving, including your own mother, who, not to make light of her trauma and all of that, but to then turn around and return the favor to your own child, it's just sick. You gotta cut them off. Story 56. One time, my mother, her twin sister, and all of their kids of age got trashed together. It was around Christmas time, and one of their sisters, who was recovering from a surgery at the time, had someone else set up all these over-the-top Christmas decorations for her outside. I was little at the time, so I didn't go with, but all of the drunk adults drove to her house and stole this massive reindeer wire statue monstrosity from her front yard. When they got back, one of them said they should destroy it, hiding the evidence and forever erasing them of guilt. One of the adults effing threw the wire reindeer off the balcony. I helped. It shattered against their patio and was never seen again. The next day, my aunt, the sister who originally owned the now deformed, shattered reindeer, ended up getting so freaked out by the whole encounter that she was hospitalized for 2 whole goddamn days. Even today, she still had no idea who really took her beloved wire reindeer. Story 57. It's what we don't want to say or we trigger my father. Can't even talk about our life or passions without hearing 10 minutes of why he doesn't like it, and we shouldn't either. But nothing would please him anyway, so we just deal with it. Any subject, sciences, music, hobbies, even if I'm speaking to him about a project I did that he himself spoke of wanting to do, I get a nice long lecture on how it was wrong. Even without him seeing it, hypocrite of his own advice. To better answer the OP, we usually don't speak of anything outside of hunting and shooting with Dad around, and we're rewarded with family gatherings that don't result in toxic salt arguments. Otherwise, the rest of the family is pretty open to civilized discussion and nothing is really off limits. Story 58. When I was 15 to 16, I spent a total of 5 months in psychiatric hospitals and residential treatment programs, and another 3 in daytime outpatient, which isn't exactly ignored, but we don't typically bring it up. The part that absolutely never gets talked about is that I completely threw my mother under the bus for the neglect and emotional abuse my entire life that led up to that year. Everything from not being fed some nights because she forgot about me, because of my 4-year-old siblings, to being told my birth ruined her life, to her signing me out of a hospital against medical advice while I was literally near death because she felt I wasn't as ill as the doctors were saying and she could drive me to another hospital rather than waste the money on the helicopter transport I was supposed to have. CPS was called on her 4 times during that year. I would literally refuse to leave hospitals because she would act all loving there until I left, then would berate me for wasting the money and would refuse to give me my medications. It was a mess. It is slowly repeating, and I'm counting down the days until I leave the country for grad school. It's still a lot of days. Story 59. Wow, well, we just had one this week, and it is chalking up to be a no-speak situation. My aunt has terminal cancer, and her end-life plans are to spend them on a farm owned by extended family in the middle of Amish country. This seemed idyllic to her after spending her whole life working long, hard hours as a nurse. She wants to die at home, with family. My mom goes out there, supposedly to help care for her and spend some precious time with her during her last few days. My mom gets there and decides it's too much for her to handle, and she wants to leave. Her dying sister is ridiculous and unreasonable for not sleeping through the night. But before she leaves, she bullies my extended relatives into putting my aunt into a nursing home. My aunt is incoherent and can't speak for herself. I have no say in the matter, given that I'm 1,000 miles away and, quote, you just don't understand what it's like. So my aunt is put into a nursing home. My mom leaves, and my aunt dies, absolutely alone, with no one in the room with her, in a nursing home she didn't want to be in, 4 effing days after my mom leaves. My aunt died on August 13th. I can barely get through most interactions without crying. I'm a mess. My mom? Not a tear. She doesn't even talk or want to talk about her. Cold-hearted female dog. She wonders why I moved so far away. Story 60. My dad's childhood is shrouded in mystery. I was told by my cousin, who was told by her mother, my dad's sister-in-law, said that him and his brothers could get away with anything because the country they lived in was ruled by a dictator and their dad was the police chief. Therefore, my dad and his family was untouchable by anyone without horrible repercussions. I was told that my dad and his twin grew and sold weed when they were younger. That was a little bit of a shock, but alright. What was really effed up was the eldest brother. He was essentially a pimp in a small town. In his 20s, he owned multiple women and rented them out. Now, the only reason he stopped was because a lot of women turned up missing. We're not sure if maybe he was responsible or if it was a deal gone wrong or a rival who tried to kill off the competition. But my uncle was getting all the blame for the disappearances, so a lot of people were gunning for him. He eventually had to run out of the country to escape the persecution. He moved to the US, and that's why my dad's family all lives there now. But my uncle has always been a huge dick. He made his wife change her name because her original was too Mexican. He always neglected my cousin who has mental retardation. And I've heard another family rumor that he cheated on his wife. Also, when his daughter was acting up as a teenager and was really into black guys, he moved the entire family back to his home country because it was finally safe to teach his daughter to behave. No one in my family talks about this, and we all still get together and go on vacation together, but I look at him in an even worse light now. Story 61. It's my in-laws, but family is family, right? My husband's mom and aunt are less than 4 months apart in age. This is because his grandfather impregnated the 16-year-old daughter of the family that did seasonal work on their farm. When her family found out, they left her on the farm, and she had 2 more of his children while he and his wife were still married. They all lived together for years, sister-wives style, and raised their kids together. Finally, the wife left, then met a married man who treasures her. They were in their 40s when they got married, but they traveled the world together before buying a house. They turned the front yard into a flower garden and the back into a vegetable garden. They still tended in their 80s. The husband and mistress, they're married, but I need to differentiate, still work for the farm, have never traveled or seen anything beyond what their town has. The husband was and is a leader in the church, and this all happened so long ago that none of their peers are alive or remember. His second wife is a bitter hag because she's still doing hard labor in her late 60s. My favorite part is that they're good Christians who told my husband and I that we're living in sin when we choose to cohabitate before marriage. They said we needed to get married or break up or we were going to burn in hell. Lovely couple. Story 62. The majority of my family are homeless, drug addicts, or just straight a-holes and leeches. We still all get along in a loving but dysfunctional way. I don't live by them as I went to the city and down my own path, but I speak to them all on the phone once every week or two. I made it clear I won't help them with money. They just blow it in a week and are back to square one. My girlfriend knows about everything and still invites them to the wedding. She's a keeper. Her family is full of doctors and Catholic priests, super strict Asians. Everyone dresses well and whatnot. My family is straight white trash, probably going to roll up in their beaters and be wearing jeans and a tee. Probably sneak in some water bottles full of vodka and some weed. Can't wait. It's gonna be wild. Edit. The actual question. One thing my family doesn't speak about is how my sister's ex-husband SA'd his own kids. He's currently serving a 20-year sentence. He also used to lock kids in the bedroom with my sister and other women he slept with and made them watch. My sister actually served 5 years as well, just because she didn't want to make the kids testify for some reason. In all reality, she was just as much a victim as the kids. The kids ended up in foster care and are 18 plus now. The system is effed. Pretty much cut the kids off and threw them into society. They're all pretty helpless and think they're above working. I'm glad myself and one other sister rose above all that nonsense and ended up with a nice life. Story 63. My aunt married a convicted predator when I was a kid. When he asked my grandpa for his daughter's hand in marriage at Christmas dinner, he looked at him and said no. He turned around and asked her to marry him anyway. She said yes. I was like 8 at the time and horrified. I remember she would become upset when us kids went to family dinners because, quote, that means Chris can't come. As if that's not the most backwards logic that ever did happen. My mom on one occasion told him that if she ever saw him alone with me or my second cousin, the 2 young kids left, she would break his kneecaps and tell the police it was a football accident at one of the family events he came to anyway. Later, she went to their house to help with something, and I remember me and my second cousin waiting in the car while she threatened him about trying to come outside with us in the car. She was fiercely protective, and both us girls probably owe the fact that he didn't SA us to my mom. My aunt eventually divorced him when he was in jail for something unrelated, but a couple years ago he was back in the cage when a mother came home and he had the hand of a little 5-year-old girl he was babysitting stuck down his pants. Only our closest family speaks of it, but it was kept secret so long that my second cousin had to hear the story from me when she was like 16. Story 64. My dad's brother likely had an undiagnosed serious medical condition, perhaps paranoid schizophrenia or some sort of problem with his brain. We called a family meeting at one time, with just his brothers and, inexplicably, my gay cousin, which we also don't talk about. My uncle was a civilian employee for one of the U.S. military branches and was an engineer. He had worked on some high-level, top-secret stuff. He was convinced that the government had put an implant in his brain that they could trigger remotely to cause him pain if he ever mentioned it. They were closely monitoring all his computers and phones. He was worried they would black bag him and wanted his brothers to know that, just in case something happened to him. They assured him everything was okay, did nothing else, and sent him home. My cousin is still confused as to why he had to be there, but my uncle would say nothing unless he was present. A couple of weeks later, he was coming home from a jog and found 2 strangers in his house. He thought they were there to rob him, I guess, or that they were from the government, sent to take him. He immediately attacked the man, wrestling him to the ground. The guy fought back and they fell into the stairs. The woman took out a gun to shoot my uncle, but missed and shot the man instead. My uncle hit his head and slipped into a coma shortly afterward. After a couple of days, he died in the hospital. It was not his house. It was the couple's house. The poor woman shot her own husband trying to defend against a violent stranger. My uncle wasn't a bad man. He volunteered for charity, went to church regularly, supported his kids well, and had a passion for running. He had just finished his first Boston Marathon and was training for the next one. He was eligible to retire, but hadn't yet because he loved his job. The man he attacked was a very well-known local musician, and the incident got a fairly decent amount of press time. The photo they used for my uncle was his DMV photo, the one where everyone somehow looks like a raving lunatic. It didn't help that he had been wearing those giant square-framed glasses that are sometimes referred to as SAer glasses. What happened was tragic for everyone involved, but nobody says anything about it, or even talks about it much anymore. Story 65. My stepsister, Dad's daughter, not Mum's. Growing up, she did the following. In her early teens, she tried everything she could to get my parents to divorce so that Dad could go back to her biological mother, who was a raging alcoholic and wanted nothing to do with her. Tried to convince me and my brothers that Mum loved her more than she loved us. I was about 3 at the time. Oldest brother was about 11. Got pregnant at 14 from a local burnout that she went to school with. When Mum and Dad tried to help her be a parent, she never took advice from my mum and saw every attempt to help as Mum trying to take her kids away. Spent more time partying than actually looking after her kids. She actually tried to get me to babysit once, and I was about 6 years old. Her oldest was about 4, youngest about 2. She convinced my extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandmother, that my mum was mistreating and abusing her and treated me and my brothers better than her. Even after my dad told them it was all lies, some of them refused to believe my mum was a good person. Most of them have now realized it was all lies, but the damage has been done, and my mum refuses to have a relationship with any of them except for one of my aunts, who took my mum's side immediately. None of my relatives have ever apologized to her, and they said some truly terrible things to her. Some of them even still try to reconcile my dad with my stepsister. For example, when my oldest brother got married, one of my uncles said that nobody from his family would attend unless my stepsister was invited. She was not invited. My uncle's whole family showed up anyways, and my brother was not happy. Her daughter may have been S8 at the age of 4 or 5, but she kept it under wraps because the person who may have assaulted her daughter just so happened to be the brother of her best friend. She moved to a city about 5 hours drive away from our hometown with her burnout of a boyfriend. My parents visited quite regularly until she and her boyfriend threatened to withhold access to the kids unless my parents gave them money. At that point, my parents cut off all contact. I've spoken to her once in about 25 years. I only know these details because my mom told me one evening about everything that happened. Otherwise, we have never spoken of my stepsister. I will see posts from her on Facebook from time to time, like some inspirational memes and crap about how you need to cut out all the people who wronged you and move on, and then tag my dad and her biological mother. My oldest brother called her out on it once, and she never responded. I haven't seen her tag my dad in one of these posts since my brother called her out either. Story 66. Not my immediate family, but my uncle and his family. My uncle was married in the 70s. He had a son, we'll call him Joe, with his wife. He cheated with his secretary and ended up leaving his wife and marrying the secretary, the woman I know as my aunt since I was born in the 80s. My aunt demanded that their children never know he was married before or had any other children, Joe, and he kept it a secret for over 30 years. He would claim to be going on business trips, but was really going to visit Joe in Boston. All the while, my immediate family completely acknowledged Joe. My father, grandfather, brothers and sisters, everyone. We treated him as we would any other cousin, but around my aunt and 3 cousins from the second marriage, we never spoke of Joe. This secret finally spilled when my grandmother died and Joe refused to be hidden away and not attend the funeral. There we were, watching Joe stroll into the funeral and address my uncle as dad in front of his 3 other mid-20s children. There was mass confusion and hysteria. My cousins were furious and devastated. However, after that whole side of the family went back to not acknowledging Joe's existence. My aunt demanded he not attend any future family functions, including my grandfather's 100th birthday party. Here's the kicker. My uncle is extremely rich, as in North Jersey mansion, 3 NYC townhomes, and a multi-million-dollar vacation home rich, but he has no will. He's in his 70s and refuses to acknowledge his own mortality. Now, a battle has begun about where the money will go when he dies. My aunt has instructed him to tell Joe that he's entitled to nothing, to which my uncle obliged. Joe responded that he doesn't want any of the money. He just wants a real relationship with his father. I believe my uncle is now stashing away at least a few million to give his firstborn son under my aunt's nose. Story 67. I know I'm late, but here's my story anyway. My father essentially brainwashed me and my brother when we were pretty young and turned us against our mom. He hated her so much. He wanted her dead, no joke, along with my stepdad and baby half-brother. He brainwashed us for years and would beat the hell out of us for not doing what he wanted, which was to kill our mom for him. He trained us to do his dirty work by setting my mom's house on fire. His threats to us eventually terrified us so much we acted on our training. I was 11 and my brother 10. My mom and everyone survived. My brother and I were separated, put in individual foster homes for a year, went through months of psychiatric treatment, and were charged with arson. My father denied everything, from the heinous beatings my brother and I took, to him brainwashing us for years, to him threatening us to kill our own mother for him. He did serve a few years in prison. He got out because the sentence was overturned due to some law that changed in his behavior. He now lives in Florida with my stepmother and my half-sister, who probably don't know my family exists. Needless to say, this is not something frequently discussed. I did wind up going back to therapy in my mid-20s because I was suffering from PTSD. Still am, actually, and it was affecting my ability to hold any romantic relationship. I'm 100 times better now and want to connect with my half-sister at some point down the road. I could never allow myself to physically be in the presence of that man again. I'd likely become violent with him and land myself in jail. Story 68. Just to clear things up, I have a younger brother and my uncle has a daughter and a son. As I was writing this, I realized it might have gotten confusing had I not explained that. After my parents divorced, my mom and uncle started dating. It was my uncle on my dad's side. Calm down. Still effed up, though. He was very abusive to her, both verbally and occasionally physically. The entire family held several interventions trying to bring an end to it, but they both refused. Eventually, I told my mom I would be moving in with my grandma if she did not leave him. This was enough to bring an end to it, for a time. Although she promised everyone that her and my uncle were through, my uncle still lived with us and suspiciously didn't have his own room. I was a stupid 10-year-old, however, and thought nothing of it. About 2 years later, it was revealed that they were still together, and that they had never even talked about separating, only how to hide their relationship from everyone. This time, she wouldn't budge. One time, I remember my uncle yelling at her in our backyard and flicking a lit cigarette at her, then storming inside. The next day, when I came back from school, the whole house was filled with heart balloons, giant teddy bears, and flowers. This made me so furious that I packed up my crap and went to my grandmother's right then and there. She lives like 20 minutes away, so this wasn't as much of a sucker punch as you were probably expecting, but the message was still out there. This wasn't a one-time occurrence either. Pretty much the exact same scenario took place every single week. Huge fight, come home next day, gifts everywhere. For her, of course. One day, I just told her that it felt like she loved our uncle more than us. This alone was enough to make her bawl her eyes out and kick him out of the house that very day. Not long after that, my uncle ended up in prison, and even from his cell, he was sending her love letters, asking her to take him back. She burned every single one of those letters. Although we're all happy to be done with this, none of us trusted her completely until my uncle met another girl and had a third kid. They're both much better people now, both having stable jobs, although they completely avoid each other now. My mom went through a couple more boyfriends that were complete dicks until she met this awesome guy who everyone loves. He doesn't live with us, doesn't try to take over as some sort of father figure, he just loves hanging out with everyone. I'm not even sure if they're in a relationship or not anymore, they just love hanging out. Even my dad loves him. Yes, my dad is still in the picture. Anyway, yeah, we don't talk about this anymore. We pretty much stopped the second my uncle moved out. Thanks for reading my long-ass comment. Story 69. The final blow-up that pushed my mother to take my brother, sister, and I and move across the other side of the country. Until then, my mother had managed to keep my father's abuse relatively hidden from us. But one night while she was putting my siblings to bed, I threw up. She merely mentioned to him that maybe when his kid is vomiting, he should help them. His reasonable reaction was to start throwing dishes and screaming obscenities. It all culminated in me hiding behind a couch upstairs, my older brother, 12 at the time, standing guard in front of me with his prize baseball bat. My mother shouted for us to call the police if he kills her, which I attempted to do, only to find that my father had cut the phone lines. PTSD means I have gaps in my memory, but somehow, I believe my mother and I jumped over the balcony, landing 2 stories below. We got out of there. My mother drove us to the police station, but they believed she was just a bored housewife overreacting about an argument and ultimately just requested my father leave the premises for 24 hours. He came back 12 hours later, with a gun. I was the only one home, and I hid in a closet until he left. My mother barely waited for me to finish my story before she was packing. We left that day and haven't been back. Whenever we need to refer to the event, we call it my 10th birthday party, because it happened on my birthday. I once referred to that around a friend, and man did that lead to a confusing conversation. Story 70. First time posting an actual comment besides Happy Cake Days, so here goes. My biological father. Throughout my 31 years of revolving around the sun, I've stitched together bits and pieces of the story from various relatives, and this is the story as I've come to weave it in my own understanding. My mother and I were one of the last batch in our family to immigrate from the Philippines to Alaska. Of all places, I know. What a drastic change. I was barely a year old when we made that trek. Late 80s. However, my biopops was unable to join us for some reason at the time, so he was forced to stay back and wait for his immigration to go through. During that time, however, I guess my father started seeing another girl. Apparently, one night, while canoodling with said female, that female's father burst in with a revolver and threatened my biopops that if he didn't marry her, he was going to find him and kill him. So as it stands, I guess immigration wasn't going to happen fast enough, so he ended up marrying the girl and having another family. Thankfully though, I come with a pretty large, awesome, and endearingly loving family, so I'm lucky in that regard of not being completely alone. I'm pretty sure I have father issues that I'm unaware of, but just learn to deal with, especially when it comes to partnerships, but that's a topic for another conversation, lol. Not to say my family didn't have problems of our own. Financial struggles, alcoholism, domestic violence, regular run-of-the-mill stuff, lol. But I like to think I came out somewhat decent and have faith and trust in my moral compass. With all that said, though, I can recall various moments in my childhood where family members would comment on how uncannily I resembled my biopops, to which I would just shrug and proceed to ask if I could go play in the forest. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the frustration I encountered from my mother was because of the fact that I looked so much like the dude who abandoned us. Fast forward about 20-ish years later, my biopops ended up appearing on a sidebar on Facebook as one of those suggested people to friend request. Being the hopeful dude that I am, I hit request and sent him a private message as well. And of course I creeped his Facebook page. What tripped me out the most, and what was super effing eerie to me, were the things he posted on his wall. A lot of which involved matters of the universe, space, technology, and psychology, pretty much a bunch of stuff that I'm interested in. Furthermore, the words he used and how he crafted his sentences were very similar to mine. That crap right there was the crack in the floodgates and the Kraken of Tears was released. I gave it a few days before I checked if he read my message, but when I returned to see if he'd read it, I came back to find out that he had blocked me. Kinda crappy, but I guess I understand. A thing that used to live in his balls is now a grown-ass man with his own thoughts and emotions and is reaching out. I also know he has a family, which means that I have half-siblings that I would absolutely love to meet. But nonetheless, I'm sure he has his reasons for not wanting to communicate, but I still hold on to the hope that one day he'll come around and I'd be down to hug it out and catch up. Luckily for me though, and I mentioned it earlier, I come from a large family. Grandparents had 11 kids. I know, immigrants, am I right? The VJJ is not a clown car. The majority of which are women, so I'd say I'm fairly in touch with my emotions and expressing myself. But I can't help but feel like there's something obviously missing and a great deal I could gain from getting to know my biopops, and as such, I make art from my experiences. So if you'd like to check it out, send me a DM. So with that said, if the universe would help a brother out and put some light into that man's heart that one of his seeds wants to get to know him, that'd be fantastic and truly marvelous. Okay, not a whole lot to comment on this story, it is what it is, but I've never heard of a child refer to themselves as a thing that used to live in their dad's balls. That was kind of funny. Story 71. The times my family members nearly died or almost got seriously injured. There's a time my sister tried to blow me up. That one hurt a lot, but no serious injury. I nearly killed her as a result. She also tried to stab me with a pocket knife. I managed to grab it out of the air. I punched her so effing hard after that one. My parents didn't see what happened, plus they never punished us for anything. We still turned out partially sane. There's the time my father nearly pushed me sitting in a tractor, with the tractor off of an 80-degree hill that was maybe 30 feet tall, using a bulldozer because he wasn't paying attention to the effing cliff behind me. I tried to jump off, but the tractor is really old and the seatbelt jammed, strapping me to the tractor. I don't like being near him and his bulldozer. There was the time my sister died from an allergic reaction, was given an EpiPen by my mom, who proceeded with CPR until the paramedics arrived with the zappy thing. I can't spell the name. Defibrillators? Spell check for the win. This happened after I went to bed and woke up confused why I only had 2 sisters all of a sudden, and then disappointment when I realized I still had 3. There's the time we went to Spain. We never, ever, ever, ever talk about Spain because 6 of us went for 1 week and we spent more time in hospitals than in hotels. The above-mentioned sister and her twin both nearly died this time. She had another reaction, got out of the hospital, and my parents gave her a scooter as we're a glad you're alive present. She proceeded to fall badly and really mess up her knee and ended up in the hospital again the day she got out, and the other found some berries, was told not to eat or let anyone else eat them. She ate them and collapsed on the footsteps of our vacation home. She wasn't breathing and foaming at the mouth. They were 4 at the time. They're now 18. Then there's the time my stroller rolled into a really busy road. When we were cleaning the attic, I found a wrangled piece of metal with some fabric and a lonely, broken plastic wheel sticking out of it. I asked my dad, and he said jokingly, "I tried to kill you, but you lived." My mom said that I had been in the stroller and she took me out. My dad didn't see this, but did see it get demolished by a truck going 50 mph. I think that's 80 kph. Why did you still have that, Mom and Dad? Why? After 10 years. Then there's the big bonfire, big pile of wood, lit it on fire to get rid of it. Flames easily reached 30 feet into the air, and it kept getting bigger. This was my dad's idea, so I asked him if he knows what he's doing, with a blank expression staring in his giant-ass fireball in the middle of the woods as he responds with a hollow, distant no. Finally, there's the time our septic tank overflowed. Note to all reading this: empty your mother-lovin' septic tank. You do not want to have crap bubbling up in your sink or taking a crap in negative 30 degrees Celsius weather in a forest filled with coyotes that you can hear everywhere but cannot see at 3 a.m. with the flashlight in one hand and your chicken in the other so it doesn't freeze. Please, people of Reddit, learn from my family's mistakes. Story 72. Let me think about the things they do talk about. Hating immigrants and being disappointed in someone or something. Now the fun part. When I was 18, I learned my dad had quite a long affair with my godaunt. Yes, my mother's childhood friend and they still seem to get along really well, so I was wondering when the crap happened. If she still becomes my guardian, it must have been after my birth. Awkward. No one answering my question. My 8-year-old brother only said he didn't notice anything, and I do trust him. The only one. Let's move on with my dad effing other women. Oh wait, I know of 2 more. One which was quite some time ago, building up to an insane story of her lying to my whole family about having cancer to get some attention and even thought up a effing kidney transplantation in the Netherlands. She was at a friend's house at the time. So I'm only talking about my dad, but no one ever talked to me about my sister being SA'd by my cousin. Like, WTF. I only knew because I found a letter she wrote addressed to our school's pastor, and wondered why my family just casually stopped talking to that part of our family. Oh wait, they ain't talking to another part cause that an uncle stole my grandparents' house after they died by doing crap to/with some documents. And what are we talking about? Effing dry bread and why my brother isn't married yet. Oh, I'm not straight, by the way, and they know, cause I effed the neighbor's son for like 5 years during my teen years. We're not talking about any of my life at all. What in all the hells is this guy talking about? Jeez. Don't do drugs and post on Reddit, guys. Then you end up with posts like this. Story 73. The Great Raccoon Fiasco of '05. We were up north in the Muskoka region of Ontario, Canada, visiting our cottage during the summer. We had visited this cottage multiple times throughout our childhood. Nothing but great memories to come from it. But on this day, everything I knew about this illustrious summer home was about to change. Drastically. We had gotten in there late July, peak summer heat. Every insect from the 8th circle of hell out to feast on the living yet again. And wouldn't you know it, raccoons were ready to pounce on any opportunity they had for food. We had already been hearing stories about keeping your goods locked up in a safe place in case the raccoons got in. We thought we were prepared. We thought. Myself, my parents, my sister, my uncle, and his 2 kids arrived into the house, ready to enjoy our 4 days away. It wasn't long before we heard it. Slight tapping coming from certain areas around the house. We were curious, but thought nothing of it, until I heard my mom scream. We all ran to the source of the sound. There we saw about 3 raccoons in the unused living room, just minding their own business, but in a suspicious way. My uncle was ready to fight. He quickly grabbed a broom and rushed in, shooing them towards the window. One hissed and began to scratch at the broom. The broom fell out of my uncle's hands, and the raccoon immediately climbed on top of it. That broom was the raccoon's now. It wasn't until my uncle rushed out of the room, fearing the worst, that two other raccoons came out of the closet. Yes, I know, and ran towards the other raccoons. Long story short, our trip was cut quite short, and we ended up returning home as an extermination was called to help the raccoons get out of the cottage. Turns out, they got in through the basement windows, and from there, found their way into the air vents, leading them from the closet to the living room. We don't really like to discuss the event. Quite traumatic as you might imagine. I'll never look at raccoons the same way again. Story 74. That time my brother-in-law blamed me for his fiancée dumping him, even though I had nothing to do with it. Or how about the time my brother-in-law told my husband, his brother, that he was wasting his time with me and that I was ruining his life? Or how about the time that my brother-in-law called my husband, his brother, in the middle of the night to come pick him up because his crazy GF kicked him out, and he lived 14 hours away? Or how about the time that my brother-in-law threatened to kill me because I told my husband we were no longer going to be financially responsible for him, i.e. pay his rent and groceries and video games? Or how about the time my brother-in-law got in my face and told me I was a terrible wife and mother and wouldn't let me past him to get to my crying baby, making a huge fight and forcing my husband, myself, and our 6-month-old baby to sleep in the airport? Basically every interaction with my brother-in-law, but everyone just pretends we're all a happy family and they cannot understand why I refuse to allow him anywhere near our children now. Sorry, not sorry. Story 75. My ex-husband. I'm not joking. His name is a curse word for only the most idiotic of screw-ups, like life-threatening screw-ups. I speak in terms of my family outside of my household. Inside my home, we just simply don't talk about him unless the kids want to know something. He was abusive of me and the kids while we were together. My dad nearly killed him. Courts took his side in the divorce and allowed him to keep joint custody, despite evidence and even CPS testimony against him that not only was he abusive, but he had no intention of changing. When he continued to abuse the kids and I tried to keep them from him, the court threatened to give him full custody and strip my rights. Only when I moved a mile away from him with my new spouse and bought a weapon did he stop abusing the kids. Now he doesn't even so much as visit because between me being willing to hide his worthless corpse and the kids being old enough to fight back, he has no use for them. Life is somewhat more peaceful now, as well as it can be with the kids being teenagers. He has a new spouse and toddler with her. I worry about the safety of that child, but it's not like the courts in this state give a single damn about kids anyway. They took his side just because he quoted some Bible verse about disciplining children and called himself a dedicated Christian. Story 76. This is a fresh discovery, that my cousin's son is gay. Apparently, we chose the same hideout for our booty calls, and his booty call was very much male. I'm living with my parents at the moment. Our house is very close to my uncle's house, the kid's grandparents. Both houses in the same plot of land, and on the back there's a shared swimming pool surrounded by plants and trees. This kid lives in another town, a 5-minute car ride from here. It was a midnight 40. I was in the swimming pool, all lights off, with this date, when I see these two boys coming up. They didn't turn on any lights. They just used the torch on their phone not to stumble anywhere, but it was obvious that they didn't want to be seen, and they had chosen the right time for that because there's absolutely nobody around at the time around the property. Didn't consider his father's horny-ass cousin. When they saw us, they acted very awkward and then decided to leave. So the last time I'd seen the kid, when he was like 5, I didn't know him at all, and the following day, I asked another cousin if she knows anything about him, what his habits are, if he smokes weed or something. That was one possibility that came to my mind, and she doesn't even let me finish my question. Do you know if maybe if he's gay? Yes, he is. Don't ever mention it around. His father doesn't know and would get mad. Story 77. Very late to the party, and most will probably ignore it, but you've been affected by this if you've been born in the last half-century. We didn't talk about Marie. For the longest time, I thought my maternal grandmother only had 3 children. My Uncle Jack, my Aunt Jean, and my mom. But she had 4. Before my mom was Marie. Marie died shortly after she was born. A week, maybe 2. Nobody talked about it. That is, until my Uncle Jack began to slip into dementia and told the story before he lost it. Marie died of something that was at the time known as a hemorrhagic disease of the newborn. For some unknown reason, a newborn would die from massive internal bleeding. When she died, my grandmother did something that was remarkable at the time. She handed over her deceased child to the doctors who were asking to examine her. Grandma was devastated by her loss, but wanted to make sure that it meant something. That maybe if she did this difficult thing saying other mothers wouldn't have to watch their baby die. As it turns out, this was the beginning of the scientific research which led to the discovery of vitamin K deficiency in newborns. Vitamin K is a clotting agent that doesn't pass through the umbilical cord, so newborns are very susceptible to bleeding and, as a result, are given vitamin K injections at birth to hold them over until their bodies start producing it naturally. That all started with Marie. Story 78. I'm the last victim in what is evidently a generation's worth of child essaying predators. My first older brother, closest to me in age, we'll call him K, essayed me from the time I was 8 to around 9 to 10 years old. I hadn't spoken about my abuse to anyone in my family, but the thought of K being around my nephew made me sick, so I warned M, who seemed to have no reaction and declared that it would be fine and he doesn't know what I'm talking about. Roughly a year after, I mentioned this to my father, who tells me that he thinks M was essaying K as a child, and consequently, K essayed me as if this was some kind of justification, or that some kind of a statement you can just act normally saying. Years before any of this, I snooped on my dad's phone for no real reason, and opened a dating app he had while married to his second wife, where I find messages he sent to various men describing in graphic detail how he'd like to suck them off and all manner of other things. That marriage ended after my stepmom seemingly discovered this. So basically I have 2 older brothers who were involved in the essay of their younger brothers. Now I know that my father is a closet gay/bi man, and I wonder if he essayed my oldest brother S, and that is how all of this began. More contributing evidence to this theory is that less than 3 months ago, S was living with Dad. They got into a fight, and S went through his hard drives and began telling anyone who knows him that he's a predator. I don't have any proof of my dad essaying S, but I may as well have with what I do know about him raising suspicion, specifically in this context. So, TLDR, I have reasonable evidence to assume my father essayed S essayed M essayed me, and obviously I'm damaged deeply by all of this and don't know how, as the last victim, that any of them thought this was something that was okay to do because it was done to them. This is not able to talk in my family. Genuinely hope my despair provided an interesting answer, as this is not something I put forth lightly, but that is the requirement of the question. Yeah, thank you OP here for being the one to break this wheel, this cycle of just absolute sick insanity. Good for you. I hope that you heal from this to the best that you can, and continue to raise awareness. Story 79. My kids and I found out that their mom was a liar about everything. I went to college in the 70s. My first year in the dorm, my ex-girlfriend shows up claiming to be pregnant by my digit. I'm a stand-up guy, so I agree that we should get married. She tells me that's not enough. I have to drop out of college and work for her dad. Her dad was in sales. I tell her I don't want that kind of profession. I'm going to college. I have a effing 1420 on my SAT. Not great nowadays, but through the roof in the 1970s. When you were told to not study for the SAT, I keep saying, let's get married, but she refuses unless I drop out of school. I won't. She leaves. A couple of weeks later, I meet a girl at school. She says she's going to the same school as me. Turns out she's not a college student, she's a junkie. She tells me, quote, "Don't worry about the birth control, I have it covered." She didn't. She lied. I knock her up, I marry her, and continue my college journey. In the end, we have 3 kids, but she's seeing this guy the whole time. I'm publicly a cuckold, and the guy doing it to me is a great friend of the local police. We stay married for 7 years and 3 children. She leaves me for the guy she's been seeing. Turns out he's a predator. A child essayer, if you will. He likes to slip children drugs and essay them. It doesn't come out until my kids are visiting and they tell me. This is 7 years later still because the guy wouldn't let me talk with my kids, and the county judge and police are on his side, but they managed to get a message to me. So what we don't talk about is Carrie and how she put their mother in our lives, and that's why all 3 of my kids have been essayed numerous times by their mother's boyfriend. We talk about it very little now, but I have to interact with the mother and I try to encourage the kids to. They were all adults now. Not write her off. The essayer was sentenced to 165 years to life, but got out in like 14 years because he's a Mason, and I really don't want to argue that point, so F off. So we don't talk about the liars that hurt my kids, but he's out there free, and I know where he lives. I know where you live too, Carrie. Our family doesn't talk about the tragedies, but I think about them all the time, and I know who is involved and where they are at all times. So sleep tight, those of you involved in that. I'll never forget, and the final tally is yet to be taken. Story 80. I'm drunk. I ran away from home one night from an abusive, angry, aggressive stepfather while my loving mother was away. I ran forever, it seems, till deep in the night through the woods barefoot because I didn't have time to grab shoes. I found a hunting chair in the trees and stole the bags to hold bullets and drinks for my feet. With a new bag of shoes, I could handle the ants and sharp wood on the floor of the forest. I was crying and confused. No direction of where to go or what to do. Where can a kid go, really, in the middle of the southern pine woods? I moved through the night with spite and determination not to let my horrid stepfather in. Hate. I hated him. I found a clearing with a random house that didn't belong. Broken down trucks littered the large yard, two halves of two separate child's playgrounds near the home. I was desperate, stupid, and young, and knocked on the door for help. A large black mother cautiously opened the door. I didn't have the thought process to lie. I told her. I ran away. I was alone. Sad. I told this stranger my life, my struggles, my situation, hate. Her husband joined her as I explained and took over listening. He didn't let me in. I didn't ask to. He talked to me on the porch. He told me he couldn't tell me what to do. I didn't ask him where to go. He wouldn't know any more than me, but he did listen. The mother brought me a full meal after a while. Sausages, grits, and green beans. I don't know how she made it so fast. Leftovers? Didn't taste like it. I heard a kid inside. Did she share their dinner with me? I ate. I cried. He listened. The mother brought me shoes. They were small, but they were better than bags. I thanked them and left. I'm sorry, you angels. I don't remember your names, but maybe you wouldn't care anyway. I don't believe in God, but you did, and you did him proud, I think. I thanked them and asked where the highway was. I ran with my new shoes. I could go anywhere with my new shoes. I ran to the highway through brush and bark, both bruised. I ran until the night ran out. Hate didn't sleep. The memories of lost birthdays to drunken outbursts and fear of leaving my room, of being scared to make food on my own unless I burned the house down. I woke from the tree I leaned against hours before. The sun rose with me. I was at the highway and another single home on its own. A farm. I hopped over young carrots and saw distress in the ground in several places. Angry holes. I wondered how angry my stepfather was when I left. I wonder how deep in trouble he was with my mother. Yes, I'll keep going. The longer I run, the worse it is for him. Good. The single old man that ran the farm wasn't as trusting at the door, greeted with a gun. It's all right. He needed to go out to feed the chickens anyway. I stayed outside and just followed him around. I don't know what I'm doing. There was nothing to do. I learned about chickens from him. He was seriously alone in that big farmhouse and liked talking and complaining. His old computer didn't work anymore. I told him I'd look at it. He was happy to hear. His house was messy in an organized way. He had stacks of Pepsi 36 packs to the ceiling in the kitchen. He liked Pepsi. His computer was a decade old. His mouse wasn't plugged in. I'm a genius, apparently. I got an idea, though. No phone. I didn't have one, but I could look up my real father on the internet, and I call him with the house phone. The old man took convincing to use the phone, but he loved his new working computer. I called my dad. Then again, and again. He answered hungover. He was only hungover when he wasn't drunk. I tried to get into the phone until he sobered enough to pick me up. Something to hold over my mother, who got full custody. He jumped at the idea. I cleaned chicken poop until he arrived. I don't remember your name, old man, but I hope you got a new computer. You deserve it. He gave me a Pepsi when my father pulled up. Dad wanted details, info to boost his ego against Mom, to use against her. Driving to his place, I gave him little, just to keep him happy. Mom deserves no hate. Dad drank as soon as he could. I think he was celebrating, laughing and relaxed, carefree and anger-free. I will never be like him. I called Mom after he fell asleep again. Mom had been crying. I'm sorry, Mom, but I'm staying here for a while. Stepfather was forced to a hotel somewhere. Good. I hope he's angry. She picked me up later and put me into a cheap apartment. I finished high school on my own. No more stepfather, but I don't know if I won. They're still together and it's been years later. I'm in my own apartment now, finishing my degree a few years late this fall. I hate Les now. Hate would be a win for him. I'm focused on myself now. I'm the most successful child out of 4. He'll be too old soon to take care of himself, and they'll turn to me for care. And I will. I still hate, but hate is how he wins. I'm going to love, like my mother. He'll die soon enough, and with his and my hate, I honestly cannot wait. Until then, we won't talk about where I was or what happened. Mom can't divorce him or lose too much. Until then, we will be loving, silently waiting till he dies with his hate. Story 81. that I have two sons 4 months apart, 10 and 11, and I do not allow myself the blessing of being in their lives because of my violent anger and mental illnesses, that every wall in my house has holes in them, me being essayed and abused from my people in my childhood neighborhood, daycare, multiple schools, etc., hung, would be taken out into the middle of the woods and left multiple times, forced nudity when I was way too young to know what was happening, and had to unclothe and turn 360 degrees before entering my good friend's house. Was an angry child, so I started really acting out in 3rd grade and was forced to spend most of my 3rd grade in a 1st grade classroom. Couldn't even fit in the desk. My extended family and the fact that they all have either died from cancer, substance abuse, and or mental illness-related self-unalivings. My numerous stints in various rehabs for a multitude of addictions and mental health issues. That I take 3 different medications just to function, kinda in society, without mania or night terrors and hallucinations. Story 82. My father's life before my mother. My dad is happy-go-lucky and in a terminally good mood. He's done very well for himself. My mother, sister, and myself have never wanted for anything. The only time my dad's past ever came up was when I was about 17. My aunts on my mother's side were visiting with my cousins. We were all eating lunch and my aunts and my mother were all reminiscing. One of my aunts asked my dad about when he was a child. My dad tried to make a joke about it. My aunt kept pressing. My mom jumped in and tried to divert the conversation, and Dad got real quiet, which was not normal because he's a loud, fun guy. My sister and I jumped in and started begging Dad to tell us about when he was a kid. Dad just stands up, gets in his truck, and leaves. Mom rushed after him and saw him to the truck. Mom came back and she was furious. My sister and I could tell. She told my cousins and my aunts that Dad wasn't feeling well and maybe everyone should leave. It turns out that Mom had specifically told her family that Dad didn't talk about his past. It made him uncomfortable and not to ask about it. As Mother would say, just let it die. My aunts knew this, but my one aunt just couldn't help herself. After everyone leaves, Mom sits my sister and me down. She explains that she doesn't really know much about Dad's past, except that he grew up very poor. His father abandoned them and his mother worked 2 jobs. Essentially, all the siblings raised themselves. She said Dad endured things as a child no one should have to endure. She said he moved out when he was 14 and never looked back. She said that when they met, Dad told her some things so she would know what she was getting into. But Dad said he didn't ever want to talk about his past again. After that conversation, we never brought it up. This is also when we found out for the first time that my father had sisters and brothers, whom we have never met. My parents are very in love and have been married 41 years. Mom is very protective of Dad, and Dad would do anything for Mom. Even though they're much older now, Mom still doesn't talk about Dad's childhood, and Dad still won't talk about it. Likely, they will take it to the grave. Story 83. Homosexuality or anyone that isn't German. My family is extremely homophobic and racist. I come from a worker-class family where I'm the only one with a basic school degree, a higher school degree, and a bachelor's. While one parent has no school degree at all, the other has just the basic. From my 2 brothers, one tried 3 times for the basic school degree, and the other has none. Both failed 3 apprenticeships each, and now kind of have finished, but were so bad that they don't really earn that much compared to other apprentices of their classes, but will still earn way more than my parents, e.g. I only talk about the financial and educational situation because I've noticed that people that often have no good educational background or financial stability often harbor extreme resentment to anything different, like homosexuals and foreigners. None of my family are neo-Nazis/Nazis, but degrading humor and blame gets thrown around easy, and it's the thing I hate most about my family and brothers. I'm honestly glad that my father is only in the racism boat, but at least accepts homosexuality and is overall a really nice person. But my brothers are total dicks. You can't argue with them because they're the famed pigeon in the scenario. You know, the one where you discuss chess with a pigeon and explain that her move was wrong, while the pigeon struts around the board, knocks down the pieces, craps on everything, and proclaims itself the winner? Story 84. My father was in a mental institution 2 times in his youth, and we had to find this out the hard way. It all began last year when my father was starting to sound really weird during phone calls. I've left the city for college some years ago. Afterwards, work and rarely visit. He seemed paranoid of everyone and started talking really cryptic and sad. It felt really odd, so I decided that I should take a trip back there ASAP. My aunt, father's sister, also realized something is off, and she confided to me that actually my father was institutionalized 2 times in his youth, once when he was 18 and once when he was 22. They were all caused by a mental breakdown and manifested through depression and paranoia. I still remember how she said that after my father came back from there. He was never the same. I didn't think much of this. She was 14 back then. What could she understand? Adding pieces together, it turns out that many stories told by my father since I was little were mostly lies. He never joined the army. He didn't follow the college career that he wanted because by the time of the finals, he was in the mental institution. But most heartbreaking, it turns out that he was supposed to marry his high school sweetheart. I remember he told me small stories about her, and I asked him what happened, and it was too simple, it didn't work out. The second time he went to the mental institution was because of the stress of the marriage, and what I've understood, his father's disapproval of her. She went to visit him there once before deciding that she didn't want to marry him anymore. They've never talked since, as far as I know. Probably waiting with him in line to have the psychiatrist take a look at him and actually convince the doctor to take him in was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. He didn't know whether the sad behavior of my father was normal for him or not, so I felt the doctor was reluctant. In only a few hours, he called me to let me know he would have to take my father to the nervous wing, considering his bad behaviors toward the assistants. It took even more convincing to not let this happen. My father stayed in that part of the institution in the first 2 times he went there and resented it. The next few weeks were not really great either. I was lucky enough to be able to work remotely and could visit him 2 times a day. Sometimes, only 1 hour after my morning visit, I would get a call from him asking where I was and whether I would be going that day to see him. He probably forgot lots of things during that period because of the medication. He's better now. For 6 months after being released, he had to take antidepressive pills, and he said he was feeling sleepy all the time, but I still hear him laugh from time to time, which never happened during that period. Maybe knowing about his problem beforehand would have made it easier to react to it. I just wish my relatives from my father's part would have said anything about it. Needless to say, we don't talk much about these few weeks. Story 85. My mom, dad, and stepdad were alcoholics and drug addicts. I might be a crack baby, or at least a coke baby. Dad abused mom and my brother. I was a baby, but he threatened to beat me too before she left him. Mom gets with stepdad at some point. Timeline's fuzzy there. Dad claims mom cheated, mom claims dad cheated. Stepdad is a major dick. Abusive, did weird mind-effery things to us. Like make us take baths and then dump ice cubes on us. I think it was to see our baby chickens do the turtleneck thing. Stepdad has kids. Their mom was cheating on him with a bunch of guys at the same time, in the same shower, on the same day. She's cracked out, drives them up to the house stepdad and we were in, and locks them in his car. Doesn't tell anyone, just bounces. Mom comes home from work to find them there. Stepsister was about 3, diaper full and a hot VW bug during the summer in Northern California. Not a pretty sight. They were effing wild kids. Snatch food right out of your hands, piss at the dinner table, take crap and break it because it wasn't theirs. Mom and dad drunk fought every night. That's not an exaggeration. Every night until they broke up temporarily when I was 13, screaming about how we, little kids under the age of 5 to 10, were pieces of crap. How my stepsister was a whore. How the other spouse's children were ruining their lives. Fast forward a few years, and Mom throws stepdad out of the car on the freeway because he was following some girls in another car that kept showing him their tits. He gets home and Mom walks out of the shower, drops her towel, and knees him square in the face. Fast forward a few years. She finds condoms in their room. She's had her tubes tied years ago. They get into a full-blown fight in the middle of dinner, resulting in Mom throwing stepdad's dildos at stepsister. Fast forward a bit. Mom punches stepbrother in the face for telling her to shut up after she'd been screaming at him for a good 5 minutes straight, inches from his face. Gives him a black eye. Makes us all say he got into a fight at school. Fast forward. Stepdad is on meth. Wakes everybody up in the middle of the night holding the Mossberg shotgun. He's hearing voices in the attic telling him that they're going to kill us. Fast forward, and real dad finds out stepdad spanked me so hard he left a huge bruise on my butt. Probably for being too loud. He goes to jail because he didn't want to give us up. Instead of sticking around after finding out how bad it was for us, he moves to Alabama and we don't hear from him for 4 years. Today, all 4 kids are effed up. Stepbrother is a 37-year-old wannabe punk rock star who can't sing or play the guitar, still trying to get the approval of his father, who has never approved of him. Stepsister is a major control freak. She always had her way as a child. True brother left after stepdad rubbed his nose in the dirt he didn't sweep up in the kitchen. He's a lot like our real dad, short temper and very distant with his kids. And I wanted to self-unalive, have difficulty speaking, social anxiety, bipolar, had cancer, and a bunch of other health issues, PTSD, and catch myself being a huge dick to my friends and loved ones out of the blue for no good reason. I have a very hard time interacting with basically everyone, even my fiance. I mean, there's so much we don't talk about in our family. Basically, the first 13 years of my life are never mentioned. Story 86. That my biological mother, my adoptive parents' daughter, I was adopted by my grandparents when I was about 3, but they raised me from birth for the most part, making my bio mom my sister legally, was abusive towards myself and my 2 half-siblings, and that everyone was, quote, so proud of us any time we were forced to spend time with our abuser, because of how much it meant to our bio mom. Yeah, all 3 of us, bio mom's children, are no longer in contact with 99% of our family. We only have each other. When I spoke up about the abuse I experienced when I was in her care, I was effectively disowned. My half-sibling's father kidnapped them and moved several states away, and was awarded custody when he came forward with proof abuse took place. Then my family cut off contact with half-siblings entirely, even when my little sister wanted a relationship with her grandparents and uncles on our bio-mom's side. They basically said, only if your abuser is allowed as well, and that's the last they spoke to her. I was cut off after I had my daughter, and everyone was adamant that bio-mom was the grandma. I said no, my daughter will not know who this person is. They didn't like that. My daughter was then completely ignored by everyone in the family. Birthday, Christmases, etc., I'd leave with my child every time bio-mom walked in. Eventually, I stopped getting information and stopped getting invited to things. Story 87. My sister joining a cult. Edit. People wanted details. She read a book by this guy who claimed to be a prophet and was preaching that the end times were near. He gave dates a couple different times and said that Jesus was returning to Earth and that the apocalypse was coming, and anyone not under his umbrella was going to be taking a 100-year dirt nap. I don't know why or how she got so into it. She got baptized in a hotel pool and married her boyfriend. She already had 3 kids, and the 2 boys were only 3 and 6 when they joined. She told them that there was no such thing as Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Not a huge deal to some, but it ruined it for all of their cousins. They had to get rid of all their CDs that had any bad words in them. The kids can have anything that had to do with magic, so no Harry Potter or video games. Every Sunday they would dress up really nice, but then sit in their living room and watch the sermon. They couldn't talk to anyone who isn't in the church on Sundays. They gave the church a percentage of their paychecks. Even my niece, who was working at McDonald's, had to give a portion. There was some honey that they had to special order from them and eat too. I'd like to know more about this, but we never talk about it, so I can't ask. They'd go on vacations and meet up with other people in their church for weird holidays. The dude ended up going to prison for tax evasion, but they still followed him for a while after that, while his wife ran the sermons. I don't know what made them finally leave, but anytime she's telling a story that took place during the 10-year period she was doing all this, she refers to it as, quote, when they were in the church. She won't admit it was a cult. Story 88. I'm a bastard child and didn't meet my dad until I was 10, but there was a lot of secrecy around my parents' breakup until I was 16. My parents broke up when apparently my dad showed my oldest sister some lewd pictures and apparently lunged at her to potentially SA her. I've heard it didn't actually happen, but almost did. I don't want to know if it did or didn't, if I'm honest, and neither my dad or sister want to revisit that moment, and nor do I. Of course, this happened after my mom had 2 abortions with my dad previously, and they decided to keep me, and this was fairly early in her pregnancy. My uncle pulled a gun on my dad at a gas station for trying to SA his favorite niece. As I've gotten older, my relationships with my family have improved with all those people, but growing up, it's almost like they thought predator behavior was genetic, so everyone would get weird anytime I was around kids younger than me, even though I strive to be the typical goody two-shoes. My uncle and I in particular had a really rough relationship. I think his hatred for my dad colored his attitude towards me. I always thought my deep, dark secret that my father was a predator was my secret to bear. I'm close to my 16-year-old cousin, and one day she made an offhanded comment that led me to realize it was apparently common knowledge, just clearly not spoken around me. Me and Dad talked about it. He has a lot of resentment and guilt about that time and how his actions caused him to not be a part of my life and caused my sister some issues growing up. Funny enough, me and my older sister are almost like twins. I love her oldest daughter, my favorite niece, like she was my own, and it's never been a rift between us, but was there a lot of dirt in the shadows of my family. Story 89. Throwaway, obviously. Unlike the other stories here, this one is a secret between just the two of us. We grew up under hardcore helicopter parents who were also hardcore Christians. We weren't allowed to go out with friends. We weren't allowed to have friends come over. We didn't go on class trips. We couldn't join clubs or sports. We weren't allowed to date in high school. The only computer and TV were in the living room, where everyone could see what you were doing at all times and were unplugged at night. We had zero privacy, and this included our own bedroom. My sister and I slept in the same bed even until high school. You might see where this is going. We were young. She was a year older than me. We were both frustrated and forced to rely on each other for all entertainment and emotional venting. Eventually, we started experimenting. I don't know how we managed it, but we never crossed the line into full-on sex, but making out and mutual self-pleasuring was a nightly thing. I was a sophomore in high school when we finally stopped. It was an unspoken agreement as we both realized what we were doing was pretty effed up. We managed to talk our parents into getting us another bed, but it took work. We stopped talking to each other and lost contact for a few years, until I drunkenly called her one night. We met up and I apologized profusely for everything. For years, shame and guilt slowly ate away at me. I thought she must have hated me for taking advantage of her. It turns out she felt the same way, being the older sibling. We're friends now and hang out. Luckily, the shadow hanging over us has been mostly eroded by time, and mutually blaming our parents for forcing two teenagers to share a bed through puberty. You know what's the worst thing about it? I can't even watch adult films because the prevalence of incest niche. The years of guilt has made the sister-brother stuff make me legitimately sick to my stomach and turns me off completely if I see it in a title. Story 90. The fact that my brother has emotional issues and has tried to kill me multiple times. Twice as a teenager. He's 4 years older, so I think I was 13 then 14, so he was 17 then 18. He tried to strangle me for ignoring him as he was screaming at me to do the laundry. The most recent time was just last Christmas. I'm 22 now, he's 26, but stayed at Mom's over Christmas break from school, even though she left around noon on Christmas for a week-long vacation. I pissed him off. I honestly don't remember what started it, but I think I gave him attitude when he was being a jerk. It spiraled into me calling him a horrible father and saying that I raised his son more than he did, which is true, and that he'd never amount to anything. Also true, but shouldn't have been said. Anyway, he was purple in the face from screaming so hard and kept threatening to, quote, bash my head off the counter until I was dead. And he probably would have if I didn't have my phone in my hand and said if he touched me, I'd press charges for assault. After hours of crying, I calmed down and now I'm not allowed to talk about it. I don't care that my mom messed up with him. You cannot allow somebody to act like that and get away with it. And if he's around but my nephew isn't, I'm not allowed to come over because my mom knows I won't hold my tongue when he starts in on me. Story 91. My older brother isn't my biological brother and was raised by our father after he divorced his first wife. She wasn't someone that should have had kids in the first place. The stress of kids literally made her break out into hives. They got divorced and Daddy took both my sister and my brother. Then my meddling ass granny kept on saying, quote, a girl needs her mother over and over in an attempt to reunite them, we think. And one day she said, you're right. Then she talked my daddy into letting her have custody of her. So basically my daddy raised my brother, who's his father in name alone on the count that he's on the birth certificate, and no one knew the truth until my meddling ass sister, it runs in the family apparently, kept on pointing out that he didn't look like either of them. He went into the Navy and the fear of something happening to him and none of us being able to help him because we're not blood overtook her and she and my daddy decided to tell him the truth. In Steak and Shake so that he wouldn't do something rash like run out and get into a wreck. Don't knock it. It's an actual thing that's recommended. Don't at me. She told him that he has siblings and that she knows of his last employer if he wanted to get in touch with him. Brother was pissed that they waited so long but said, he's my father. He raised me. I don't need to start over again. I'm going to pretend that this conversation never happened, or something along those lines. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure he's told his wife. That's how much we don't talk about it. Story 92. The parentage of my middle cousin. Bit of backstory because it's confusing. Aunt married guy 1. Let's call him Dave. They had a kid. Let's call her female dog. Then a few years later, she met another guy, hereafter called Dick, and her and Dave had another kid, the middle child named Tall. Then her and Dave divorced and she married Dick. They divorced a few years later and she married Dave. Again. They then went on to have another kid, who we will call Loud. So Aunt was married a total of 3 times to 2 men. Female Dog and Loud are very clearly like Dave's kids, especially Loud, who's like a mini version of Dave. Dave is a blonde, fairly round guy, while also kind of looking like Bruce Willis weirdly, and so are Female Dog and Loud. Dick, however, was a slender, dark-haired man. Tall is a slender, dark-haired girl. Tall was also born about a year after Aunt and Dick started hanging out. As far as I know, nobody has ever asked or even approached the subject of Tall's actual father. They're also the kind of super religious people that only let their kids watch Bibleman and, for some reason, Walker Texas Ranger while their kids were growing up. So it's likely a conversation that will never happen. Ah yes, of course, the only exception to an overly religious, super helicopter parentage is to allow your children to watch some Chuck Norris. I mean, I could make a Chuck Norris joke about that, but there's already an entire lexicon of those. So let's move on. Story 93. Mental health issues. My mother was raised in the 50s, but I was born in the 90s. She was terribly conservative with most everything. I guess the idea is that although we have a family history of said issues on her side of the family, it's unthinkable to try to be proactive and discuss these things. When I was a child, I was terribly sick, where specialists at children's hospitals in Pittsburgh and Cleveland couldn't diagnose me. My father beat my sister and I a lot, with the kind of force that once my mother divorced my father, he lost custody of me from the vivid handprints left on our bodies after the first real incident. So I apparently attempted self-unaliving sometime after being able to walk again, after my illness went away. These are factors that I think drove me to attempting such an act, but I was 6 or 7, so I recall practically none of this time. I think I failed because it was winter, and leaping to your death from a 2-story home doesn't really work well when there's a foot of snow to catch you. Although I don't recall the first time, my mother would bully me, calling me bipolar throughout my childhood. Although none of the therapists she sent me to diagnosed me as such or gave me such medication for said ailment, she always made me feel ashamed about my issue with depression that I know now that I struggle with. I got to talk to therapists about her divorce though, but I was convinced it was my fault by the end. I guess they were concerned I would think it was my fault, so there must be a reason why they would think that was how it boiled down in my mind. It seemed easier for her to try and tell us that through a therapist instead of a real conversation. She also sent my sister and I to a children's support group for divorced kids too. There's nothing quite like having your world change dramatically and then being forced to hang out with people that are suffering and miserable to bring you out of a bad place. My sister, once we were with just our mom, stopped being my friend and started to bully me as well. I assume it was how she copes, but if I brought it up nowadays, she wouldn't admit she did it. I had suppressed my first self-unaliving attempt and learned about it from her around 9. So once I learned of my first self-unaliving attempt, I struggled with the idea that I did. I couldn't remember it at all. It just seemed so bizarre that I couldn't remember what made me do it, which really mystifies me how the mind can take strong memories and make them disappear. Maybe that's what drove me to my second attempt. Around Christmas, I saw the A Christmas Story movie. There was this one scene where the mother says that icicles will kill you if they fall on you. The next time I was left home alone, I went and got a shovel and tried to knock them off onto me. It obviously didn't work. Thinking back, I guess I wanted to die in a way where it seemed like an accident. The only thing that probably saved me from going in this direction and fulfilling my wish was probably video games. I lost myself in their world all the time I had. Outside, I was bullied in my trailer park. My mother wasn't getting me the help I needed. Maybe she was ashamed. I'm sure being from a time where mental health institutions were called loony bins probably didn't give her much of a desire to try and lump me into that category. I got through school and moved away for college and have accepted who I am as a person who has made mistakes. Now she's bedridden and I stopped seeing her altogether for the last few years until a few weeks ago. She has 3 brain tumors and 1 lung tumor from smoking and improper health choices. She weighs 80 pounds at 5'4", unable to get out of bed to go to the bathroom. I told her about my issues with mental health. I told her I no longer want to die. I told her about what I've been doing with my life. I told her I don't smoke because it doesn't seem worth it when I grew up with her progressive COPD issues to now how she needed oxygen to stay above 70% blood oxygen saturation. I told her I work out because I never wanted to turn 50 and be unable to do anything physically like she has been throughout my life. I left her with the only positive thing I could. I said that regardless of our lack of a connection, that she taught me how to cook, and I loved her cooking, and that although her love never really reached me, that it would through her recipes that I cooked to feed me. My whole life I've been sure I would never want to think my children were strangers, so I guess I felt the best thing I could do was fix that for her before she died. The thing is, her short-term memory is shot. I don't think she knows anything of what I told her.